There is a place on Earth where noon can disappear. Not sunset, not nightfall, not a cloud passing over the sun. Noon. A sun hanging high over the open ocean, a sky so bright it hurts to look at. Light pouring down with enough force to warm continents, grow forests, bleach stones, burn skin, and turn the surface of the sea into a field of broken silver. And then, just a few hundred meters beneath that same glittering surface, the day begins to fail. It does not fade politely. It is taken apart, color by color, meter by meter, as if the ocean has a hand and the hand is closing. By the time you reach a depth where a skyscraper could still stand upright with its roof below the waves, the sunlight has already become a rumor. By the time you reach the deep water where most of the planet's living space begins, the sun is gone completely. No glow, no blue haze, no memory for the eye to adjust to. Only black. And the strange thing is this: that black can be darker than space. Because space, for all its emptiness, is not really a place where light dies. Space is where light escapes. Light travels through it for years, for centuries, for billions of years, crossing the cold between galaxies with almost nothing to stop it. A star can burn on one side of the universe, and its last message can keep moving long after worlds are born and buried. Space looks black because there is too little nearby matter to scatter light into your eyes, because the universe is young enough and expanding enough that not every distant star has had time to shine on us. But the ocean is different. The ocean does not merely lack light. The ocean consumes it. It takes the light that made the sky blue, the light that made human history visible, the light that made every face you have ever known possible, and it breaks it down inside itself. It bends it, scatters it, absorbs it, converts it into heat so faint the body never notices. It turns noon into midnight, within a vertical distance shorter than the walk from one side of a city to the other. And beneath that midnight, there is another midnight. And beneath that, another. Layers of darkness stacked on darkness, until the familiar universe above you no longer feels distant. It feels imaginary. We have always been frightened of the dark above us. We built myths out of the night sky. We named the constellations, feared eclipses, watched comets with dread, and imagined the black between the stars as the great unknown. But the deepest darkness most humans will ever be near is not overhead. It is below, beneath fishing boats, beneath shipping lanes, beneath children floating on inflatable rings in warm summer water, beneath the blue postcards and cruise ships and beach photographs. It is under everything we call the sea. And it is not empty. That is the part that should stay with you. The darkest place you can imagine on this planet is not a void. It is inhabited. It breathes. It eats. It glows. It waits. It contains migrations larger than anything on land, creatures that write messages with their bodies, snowstorms made of the dead, rivers without banks, mountains no one has seen, and animals so delicate that the beam of a human light can frighten them out of the record forever. For a long time, we looked up at space and said, "There is the mystery." Then we lowered a camera into the ocean and learned that mystery had been under us the entire time. So before we talk about trenches, before we talk about glowing animals and black smokers and the machinery of pressure, before we talk about the tiny percentage of the deep sea floor human eyes have ever actually seen, I want to begin with something smaller. A light. A single beam of light lowered into the sea. Because if you follow what happens to that beam, you will understand why the ocean becomes stranger than space, and why the darkness down there is not simply the absence of the sun, but an ancient physical border around a world we were never meant to enter. Imagine standing on the deck of a research vessel far from land. It is the kind of day that makes the ocean look harmless. The horizon is clean. The water is an impossible blue. The ship moves with a slow, heavy patience, rising and settling as if the whole Pacific is breathing beneath it. On deck, people are preparing an instrument. Not a glamorous one, not a sleek submarine from a film poster. Just a pressure housing, a camera, batteries, sensors, a bundle of cables, a metal frame made to survive what human hands cannot. Someone wipes salt from the lens. Someone checks the seals. Someone looks at a screen and waits for the numbers to turn green. The device has no fear, no imagination, no memory of sunlight on skin. It has only its sensors and its small artificial eye. And then the winch begins to turn. The instrument leaves the deck. It swings once in the wind, heavy and awkward, and drops over the side into the water. For a moment, nothing dramatic happens. The camera is still just below the surface, surrounded by light. The sea is alive with glare. Sunbeams break on the ripples and scatter into bright shards. Tiny particles move like dust in a cathedral window. Everything feels visible, full, almost crowded with color. This is the ocean humans recognize. This is the ocean of snorkel masks and reef documentaries. The ocean where sunlight still behaves like sunlight, where blue water feels like beauty instead of warning. If you stopped the instrument here, the footage would be comforting. Fish might pass. The underside of the surface would shimmer above the lens like moving glass. The world would still have up and down, air and water, escape and return. But the cable keeps paying out. The instrument sinks, and almost immediately, the ocean begins editing the world. Red is the first thing to go. It is not a theatrical disappearance. There is no curtain, no moment where the sea announces that a color has been removed. But the physics is already happening. The longer wavelengths of sunlight, the warm colors our eyes associate with blood and fire and ripe fruit and warning signs and human faces, do not travel far in seawater. Water absorbs them quickly. It drinks them near the top. A red strap on the instrument frame dulls. A red marking on a cable turns brown, then gray, then almost black. A diver's red glove, if one were down there, would lose its warmth before the diver had gone deeper than a few floors of a building. The color most tied to urgency in the human mind disappears so early that the surface is still visible overhead. That should disturb us more than it does, because color is not decoration. Color is how the brain decides what matters. It is how fruit ripens, how wounds alarm us, how flames announce danger, how faces carry warmth. And the ocean strips away those signals in the order of their wavelengths, with no regard for what they meant to us. Orange follows, then yellow. The world cools, not only in temperature, though that is coming too, but in meaning. The palette of the surface drains into a narrower and narrower range. The golden world is gone. The green world falters. Blue remains because blue travels best in water, because it scatters and survives a little farther than the rest. But the blue deepens as it descends, hardens, thickens, until it stops feeling like color and begins to feel like distance itself. This is the first secret of ocean darkness. It is not sudden. It is a slow theft. At 20 meters, the surface still feels close. At 50, you can still imagine returning. At 100, the light is already strange. At 200, Photosynthesis is no longer possible in most conditions. The green engine that runs the visible living world has been left behind. The sea at that depth is not dead, but it is no longer powered directly by the sun in the way the surface is. It lives by leftovers, by hunger, by movement, by what falls from above and what rises at night. The camera continues downward. 200 meters. The sunlight zone ends. And this is where the story changes from a descent into water into a descent into another planet. Above this boundary, life has been shaped by light. Below it, life is shaped by the lack of light. That sounds simple until you begin to follow the consequences. In the lit water, the eye looks outward. It expects shape and color. It judges distance. It sees predators coming. It sees mates. It sees food. It sees a world arranged around surfaces and reflections. But in the twilight water, vision becomes a different kind of weapon. There is barely enough light to see by, but still enough for silhouettes. And in a place where the brightest thing is the faint glow from far above, every creature becomes a shadow to something below it. So animals turn upward. Eyes grow larger, bodies grow thinner, bellies become mirrors. Some creatures make their undersides shine just enough to match the dim light falling from the surface, erasing themselves against the only sky they have. Others become transparent, not because transparency is beautiful, but because visibility is a death sentence. Teeth become glassy, muscles become faint, whole bodies become a compromise with the darkness. The ocean does not merely hide things, it teaches them to hide from each other. And the instrument falls through that lesson without understanding any of it. Around the camera, the twilight zone stretches downward for hundreds of meters. It is not the twilight of evening, where the first stars appear and the streetlights come on, and you know darkness will last only until morning. This is a permanent dusk, a vertical country of half-light that never becomes day and never quite becomes ordinary night. A country without sunrise. A country where every shape is incomplete. There are animals here in numbers that almost defy the imagination. Fish, squid, shrimp, gelatinous bodies so clear they seem unfinished. Predators with huge eyes, and prey that have learned to become almost nothing. Every night, many of them rise toward the surface in an enormous migration, one of the largest movements of animal life on the planet, not along roads or rivers or flight paths, but vertically, through water, under cover of darkness. They go up to feed where the food is richer. They go down again before daylight exposes them. And every day on the surface, we miss it. We see the ocean glittering. We see waves. We see weather. We see boats crossing blue distances. Beneath all of it, the living water is commuting between worlds. Imagine that for a moment. While cities sleep, while someone walks home beneath streetlights, while someone checks their phone beside an open window, while a child dreams in an apartment miles from the coast, the ocean is rising from within itself. Billions upon billions of small bodies lift through the dark, a living tide moving upward toward a light they cannot afford to be seen in. Before dawn, they descend again, and by morning, the surface looks empty. That is the kind of secret the ocean keeps easily. Not because it is trying to hide from us, but because we are almost never looking in the right direction. The camera sinks deeper. 300 meters. 400. 5. The blue thins. The last warmth of daylight weakens into something colder than color. The instrument's sensors still record the descent, but the lens now sees what the human eye would struggle to interpret. A dim field. Drifting particles, sudden shapes that vanish before they become objects. This is the depth where our imagination begins to fail. We know what a forest is. We know what a mountain is. We know what a desert is. Even the moon gives us a landscape we can understand. Horizon, shadow, rock, sky. But water does not offer the mind those anchors. There is no stable ground, no skyline, no path, no familiar scale. There is only suspension. And then, somewhere deeper, the last usable sunlight is gone. Not hidden, gone. At around 1,000 meters, under the right conditions, even the faintest daylight has been extinguished. The camera has crossed into the aphotic zone, the lightless water. Above, there is still a sun. Above, clouds still cast shadows. Above, afternoons still become evenings. But none of that reaches here. The sun may as well be a myth told by creatures from another realm. And this is where the comparison with space begins to feel wrong in the most unsettling way. Because in space, if you turn toward the sun, it is not dim. It is not softened by air. It is violent. It is absolute. Astronauts orbiting above the atmosphere do not enter a gentle darkness when they face daylight. They enter a brightness so direct that the black sky and the blazing earth can exist together in the same window. On the moon, the sky is black at noon not because the sun is weak, but because there is no air to scatter its light. Space is transparent. The deep ocean is not. Space lets light pass. The ocean takes light apart. A photon leaving the sun can cross 93 million miles of vacuum and strike the surface of the Pacific. It can travel from a nuclear furnace in space all the way to Earth without being stopped. And then, after surviving that cosmic journey, it can enter the ocean and be erased within minutes of sinking. That is not just darkness. That is a kind of planetary filter, a wall you cannot see from above, a boundary that separates the Earth into two emotional worlds. The visible world, where the sun writes everything into being, and the dark world, where life continues after the writing stops. We live in the first one and pretend it is the whole planet. The second one is larger. That is the uncomfortable part. The dark ocean is not a small hidden basement beneath a bright house. It is the house. The lighted rooms are the attic. Most of the ocean lies beyond sunlight. Most of the habitable volume on Earth is not the green land, not the coral reef, not the shallow bay, but cold black water stacked in layers so deep that the human mind keeps flattening them into a single word: deep. But the deep is not one place. It is a sequence of worlds. And as the camera moves down through them, it begins to reveal a truth that is difficult to make peaceful. Earth is not, primarily, a planet of light. Earth is a planet with a thin illuminated skin wrapped around an enormous darkness. The instrument has no eyes in the human sense, but if it did, this is where they would become useless. The black around it is not like a dark room. A dark room is a temporary failure. You know there are walls. You know there are objects. Your brain can map the missing world from memory. Even a cave has boundaries. Even a midnight forest has stars between branches, distant cities glowing at the horizon, the pale wash of the moon, the promise that morning is coming. But the deep ocean has no morning. Nothing in it expects morning. The creatures down here do not wait for dawn. They do not orient themselves around sunrise. They do not store night as an interval between days. Darkness is not a condition that arrived. It is the original fact. And so life learned another language. A flash appears near the camera, then another. Not sunlight. Not reflection. Not a star. A living signal. A small animal, disturbed by the movement of the descending frame, pulses blue-green and disappears. Another creature answers with a flicker from somewhere farther off. A jelly-like body drifts past, transparent until its rim sparks with cold points of light. A fish turns, and for an instant, a row of tiny lamps along its side defines the outline of a body that was invisible a second earlier. The dark is not empty. It is illuminated from within. Bioluminescence is easy to make sentimental when we see it in photographs. A glowing jellyfish looks magical. A wave flashing with plankton looks like a fairy tale. But down here, light is not decorative. Light is strategy. Light is hunger. Light is terror management. It is courtship and camouflage and misdirection. It is the difference between being eaten and vanishing. It is the closest thing the deep has to speech. But it is a speech made of traps. A predator hangs a tiny glow in front of its face, and a hungry animal mistakes it for hope. A shrimp releases a burst of light into the water, not to be seen, but to blind and confuse what is pursuing it. A squid carries lamps under its body to match the dimness overhead, becoming an absence where a meal should be. A fish flashes not because it wants beauty, but because somewhere in the black, another body needs to be fooled. It is tempting to call this world alien, but alien is the wrong word. Alien suggests foreignness. This is older than that. This is not a stranger arriving from elsewhere. This is the Earth behaving in a way the surface rarely admits is Earth. This is our own planet, with the lights off, doing what it has been doing for hundreds of millions of years without asking to be noticed. And the camera, falling through it, is an intruder carrying a problem: its own light. Human beings cannot explore the deep without bringing light into it. We send lamps, lasers, strobes, white beams that slice through darkness like accusations. We illuminate animals that have spent their entire evolutionary history in a world where no broad daylight ever arrives. We film them, name them, celebrate them, and sometimes frighten them away with the very tool we use to prove they exist. There is something almost tragic in that. To see the deep, we disturb the deep. To record the darkness, we have to wound it with brightness. And so, every image we bring back is both revelation and interference. Every beautiful deep-sea photograph is also a confession. We do not know how to look without changing what we look at. The instrument continues sinking, its lamps still off for now, drifting through a blackness that is not black to the animals living in it. Around it, the ocean is full of faint events. Lights appear and vanish. Particles fall. Small bodies move with a softness the camera barely catches. A world of signals is occurring beyond human fluency. And this is another way the ocean becomes darker than space. In space, darkness is often honest. A black sky is simply a lack of scattered light. Objects are visible when sunlight hits them. A spacecraft can point a camera, measure photons, and build a clean image from what arrives. But the deep ocean is full of optical deceit. Water scatters, particles shimmer. Creatures hide by matching the background. Some bodies are nearly transparent, some reflect, some absorb. Some become indistinguishable from the medium around them. Even when you bring a lamp, the light does not simply reveal. It creates glare. It catches snow. It blinds the eye to what lies beyond the beam. It turns the ocean into a room filled with illuminated dust. And the farther you try to see, the more the water itself gets in the way. The darkness down here is not just absence. It is resistance. It is a physical substance between you and knowledge. That is why the deep has remained hidden so long. Not because humans are uninterested in mystery. We love mystery. We cross deserts for it. We climb mountains for it. We launch machines beyond planets for it. But the ocean resists the familiar methods of curiosity. It corrodes, it crushes, it hides, it absorbs radio waves. It scatters light. It turns simple distance into technical punishment. Space may be far, but at least you can look at it. The deep is close and refuses to be seen. Think about that closeness. The abyss begins not in another galaxy, not beyond the orbit of Neptune, not even beyond the horizon. It begins beneath the nearest patch of sufficiently deep water. There are places where a ship can pass over a plain of black ocean while people on deck drink coffee, complain about the wind, check messages, and never feel the vertical immensity beneath their shoes. The distance to the deep is not cosmic. It is intimate. It is just down. That direction is hard for us. Human minds are built horizontally. Our stories move across landscapes, roads, journeys, frontiers, borders, migrations. Even our maps flatten height into color and contour. We understand far. We understand away. We understand beyond. But down is different. Down is the direction where familiar scale collapses. Down is where a few kilometers can divide habitability from annihilation. You can drive 4 kilometers without noticing. You can walk it with headphones on. In the ocean, 4 kilometers is the difference between the surface and a dark plain where the pressure is hundreds of atmospheres and the water is near freezing, and the sun has not existed for a very long time. Distance becomes moral down there. It asks what kind of creature you are. It asks whether your blood can carry oxygen, whether your lungs can hold shape, whether your instruments can survive compression, whether your mind can remain calm while the world becomes structurally hostile. And still the ocean continues below. The camera descends through the midnight zone. Here the temperature settles into a cold steadiness. The body of water around the instrument is not dramatic in the way a storm is dramatic. It is worse. It is stable. Its indifference has no spikes. It does not rage. It simply remains what it is, mile after mile, century after century, a cold, dark volume in which every living thing has accepted conditions that would kill us quickly. The more you learn about the deep, the more you realize that human fear often chooses the wrong images. We picture monsters, teeth, tentacles, sudden attacks from below. But the true horror is less theatrical. The true horror is that nothing down there needs to be monstrous to be unsurvivable. The water itself is enough. The cold is enough. The pressure is enough. The absence of air, the absence of light, the absence of any surface you can reach by effort or panic or prayer. A place does not have to hate you to be fatal. It only has to be built for something else. And the deep is built for something else. Long before humans named these layers, long before ships crossed the Pacific, long before we imagined astronauts floating above Earth, life in the dark ocean had already solved problems that our technologies still struggle with. It had solved pressure without steel. It had solved darkness without electricity. It had solved starvation without agriculture. It had solved communication without sound we can hear or language we can translate. It had solved waiting. Waiting may be the deepest adaptation of all. In the surface world, life is frantic with sunlight. Leaves turn, birds call, insects swarm, flowers open and close, food appears in seasons, weather changes the rules. The surface is a place of episodes, interruptions, opportunities, and hurry. The deep moves differently. Meals may be rare. Encounters may be rare. Growth may be slow. A creature may spend its life conserving energy so carefully that motion itself becomes expensive. Bodies become soft, watery, efficient. Teeth become exaggerated not out of rage, but because a meal missed may not be replaced soon. Stomachs stretch, metabolisms slow. Patience becomes anatomy. And into this patient world, from above, something is always falling. Not one thing, everything. Tiny fragments of the surface, dead plankton, fecal pellets, mucus, scales, skin, decaying bodies. Dust from fires, minerals from rivers, the remains of blooms that were once green with sunlight. They clump together and sink as marine snow, a constant, delicate fallout of life leaving the bright world and entering the dark. In the beam of a submersible, it can look almost gentle. White flecks drifting downward, endless and soft, as if winter has found a way to happen in a place with no seasons. But every flake is a message from above. Every particle says, something lived where the sun could reach, and now what is left of it is coming down. The deep eats memory. It eats the summer of the surface. It eats storms after they pass. It eats blooms after they collapse. It eats whales when they die, fish when they sink, ships when they fail, plastics when we discard them, soot when the air lets it fall. It receives everything gravity can deliver. Marine snow is one of the quiet engines of the planet. It carries carbon downward, away from the atmosphere, into deep water where it may remain for centuries or longer. It links the breath of microscopic surface plants to the chemistry of the abyss. It feeds animals that will never see the organisms whose deaths sustain them. It makes the ocean not a stack of separate worlds, but a vertical economy of falling. And the camera moves through this snow for hours. The particles fill the lamp when the light turns on. They rush toward the lens not because they are moving quickly, but because the instrument is falling through them. The darkness becomes visible only as interruption, specks, streaks, fragments, a blizzard of former life. This is where the ocean begins to feel less like water and more like time. Because the deep is not only dark in the optical sense, it is dark with duration. Things happen slowly here. A particle may take days or weeks to sink. Sediment accumulates grain by grain. Bones are colonized. Minerals grow over millions of years into nodules lying on the sea floor like black potatoes of metal. Each one a record of patience, almost insulting to human ambition. Currents move through basins with the discipline of climate rather than weather. To descend into the deep is to enter a place where speed itself becomes a surface prejudice. We are fast because we live in light. We are fast because we must respond to visible things. We are fast because our lives are short and our machines are impatient, and our economies treat delay as failure. The deep does not share this urgency. It does not accelerate for our attention. It does not become meaningful faster because we finally arrived. That is one reason it unsettles us. It makes the human tempo seem temporary. The instrument keeps sinking. Above it, the surface is now not just invisible, but irrelevant. A ship may still be there. A deck crew may still be watching numbers. A scientist may still be taking notes beside a coffee gone cold. But the world of air has become a mathematical fact rather than a visible place. Cable length, depth reading, pressure, temperature. The human world is converted into data. And the darkness outside grows no darker because it cannot. It is already complete. This is the point where the title begins to sound less like exaggeration and more like measurement. The ocean gets darker than space, not because space is bright in the ordinary sense. Of course, space is black, but space remains open to light. If a photon reaches you, there is little to stop it. Stars remain visible across absurd distances. Galaxies arrive as faint smudges from eras before Earth had flowers. The cosmic dark is punctured everywhere by ancient light. The deep ocean is different. It is a place where light from the nearest star, the star that controls almost everything on Earth, fails after a thin descent. It is a place where a human being can be closer to the sun than any astronaut walking on the moon, and yet be in a darkness more absolute than the lunar sky. It is a place where the source of day is overhead, but useless. That contradiction is the hook under the hook. The deepest darkness on Earth exists directly beneath daylight. Not away from it, beneath it. A person can float on the surface in tropical noon and be separated by less than the height of a mountain from a realm where sunlight has never arrived. That vertical intimacy is difficult to accept. It means darkness is not far away. It means the unknown is not waiting at the edge of our maps. It is layered under the places we consider familiar. And this changes the way the ocean looks from above. A blue surface is no longer a surface. It is a cover, a membrane, a beautiful concealment. Every calm day at sea becomes a kind of lie, not because the beauty is false, but because it reveals so little of what it is covering. We have spent centuries falling in love with the ocean's face. The face is bright. The body is dark. The instrument falls below 3,000 meters. Here, the midnight zone continues. The pressure is no longer a number that feels attached to human experience. Every square inch of the housing carries a weight that would destroy ordinary machines. The seals hold because engineers have spent decades learning humility from water. The camera survives because every component has been chosen with the knowledge that the deep is not impressed by cleverness. In spaceflight, the enemy is often emptiness. Vacuum tries to pull atmosphere away. Heat and radiation punish exposed surfaces. But the ocean is the opposite enemy. It is not empty. It is too present. It presses from every side at once. It wants in. That phrase, wants in, is not scientific. Water has no desire. But anyone who has worked around pressure begins to speak this way because language slips under awe. The deep is always touching the machine, always testing, always applying the same simple question to every seam. Can you keep me out? If the answer is no, the answer is immediate. At great depth, a leak is not a leak the way we imagine one. It is not a drip. It is not a warning. It is the ocean entering with the force of an entire vertical world behind it. Human time may not fit between failure and destruction, and yet, inside the metal frame, a small circuit board keeps recording. There is something moving about that. We send fragile arrangements of thought into places that would erase us, and we ask them to witness on our behalf. A camera in the deep is not only technology. It is delegated vulnerability. It is the human eye admitting it cannot go, and building a substitute that might survive long enough to bring back a few minutes of truth. But truth down here is expensive. Every meter costs engineering. Every hour costs ship time, fuel, planning, risk, weather windows, money, patience. The deep resists not by being far, but by being difficult in all directions. It is difficult to reach, difficult to image, difficult to sample, difficult to communicate through, difficult to return from, difficult even to describe once you have seen it. Maybe that is why, for so long, we preferred space. Space offers spectacle at a distance. You can stand in a field and see the moon. You can see Mars as a red point. You can aim a telescope at Saturn and watch the rings appear like a secret drawn in glass. The universe rewards looking up. The ocean does not reward looking down from the surface. Look down from a ship, and after the first bright meters, you see only yourself reflected back. The sea becomes mirror before it becomes window. It gives us our own sky, our own faces, our own light broken into glitter, and underneath that glitter, it keeps the larger world hidden. So, culturally, emotionally, we became skyward creatures. We made gods above us, heaven above us, destiny above us. Progress became ascent. Knowledge became enlightenment. Darkness became something beneath. And beneath was exactly where the unknown remained. There is a quiet irony in that. We used the word enlightenment as if knowledge were always a kind of brightness. But some truths are dark. Some truths require going where light does not. The instrument descends past 4,000 meters. For much of the ocean, this is where the seafloor begins to appear, if the camera is descending over an abyssal plain. But appear is a generous word. With lights off, there is still nothing. With lights on, a pale world may slowly materialize below. Sediment, ripples, tracks, small animals, the evidence of motion in a place humans once imagined as still. The abyssal seafloor can look almost empty at first glance. That is one of its defenses against our attention. We are drawn to abundance that announces itself. Forests dense with leaves, reefs crowded with color, savannas crossed by herds. The abyss does not perform abundance for us. Its richness is dispersed, subtle, half-buried, slow. A sea cucumber moving across sediment, a brittle star raising thin arms into the current, a sponge rooted where a current brings food, a track that says something passed here recently, though recently may not mean what it means on land. On the abyssal plain, the darkness becomes horizontal again. After kilometers of vertical descent, the camera reaches a floor, but not a familiar floor. There is no forest edge, no cliff with a view, no path leading somewhere. The plane extends beyond the beam. The beam ends quickly. Beyond it, everything might as well be infinite. And this is where human loneliness changes shape. At the surface, loneliness is personal. A room without the person you want, a phone that does not ring, a city crowd in which no one knows your name. But in the deep, loneliness becomes environmental. It is not that no one is near you, it is that the entire scale of the place refuses the assumptions that make nearness comforting. A creature may be meters away and invisible. A mountain may rise beyond the beam and never be seen. A carcass may fall once in years and transform a patch of seafloor into a feast. A current may carry chemical traces through darkness, where animals read the water more fluently than we read books. The abyss is not lonely because it is empty. It is lonely because it belongs to forms of attention we do not possess. To be human down there is to realize that your senses are provincial. Your eyes evolved for air and sunlight. Your ears evolved for a narrow theater of sound. Your skin evolved for weather, not pressure. Your balance evolved around gravity and ground. The deep ocean invalidates almost all of this. It does not argue. It simply presents conditions under which the human body becomes a bad instrument. And still, through machines, we look. Because looking is one of the things humans do, even when looking hurts. The first time human beings truly learned that darkness did not mean death in the deep, the discovery did not arrive as a philosophy. It arrived as an ecosystem. In 1977, researchers exploring the Galapagos Rift found hydrothermal vents on the seafloor. They expected geology. They found something closer to a revolution. Hot, mineral-rich water poured from cracks in the earth. Chimneys smoked into the black, and around them, in a place with no sunlight, life gathered in dense communities. Not sparse life, not a few hardy microbes clinging to impossible conditions. Communities. Animals. Tube worms, clams, crabs, shrimp, bacteria forming the foundation of a system that did not run on photosynthesis. It ran on chemistry. Chemosynthesis changed the emotional map of the planet. Before that, it was easy to believe that sunlight was the ultimate author of life. Plants captured it. Animals ate the plants, or ate the animals that ate the plants. The sun stood at the beginning of almost every food chain we understood. It was not just a star. It was the source of biological permission. Then the vents appeared. And suddenly there was a place where life did not need sunlight in the old way. Microorganisms used chemicals from the earth itself as energy, and around them entire communities formed in black water. The deep was not merely surviving on leftovers from above. In some places, it was generating its own abundance from the interior of the planet. That discovery did something dangerous to the imagination. It made the dark fertile. It suggested that the absence of sunlight was not the same as the absence of possibility. It opened doors beyond Earth. If life could flourish in lightless ocean around chemical vents, then perhaps icy moons with hidden seas, Europa, Enceladus, were not dead by default. Perhaps a world could wear an ice shell and still keep a living ocean below. Perhaps the universe did not need surfaces like ours to become alive. And now the ocean was not only darker than space, it was teaching us how to search space. That is the strange loop at the center of this story. We looked down and found clues about where to look up. We explored black water beneath our feet and changed the way we imagined worlds orbiting other planets. The deep ocean, which we ignored because it was dark and difficult and close, became a rehearsal for astrobiology. But notice what had to happen first. We had to stop assuming that darkness meant nothing. That assumption has cost us more wonder than we know. The camera, in our imagined descent, might not pass a hydrothermal vent. Vents are not everywhere. They occur where geology opens the seafloor and heat and chemicals rise. But the idea of them changes every dark landscape the camera crosses. Any patch of blackness may contain a system we have not yet found. Any ridge might hide a vent field. Any trench might hold chemistry we have not measured. Any animal might carry adaptations we do not have the language to predict. The deep ocean becomes a library in a building without lights, and we have read only the pages caught in the flashlight beam. Sometimes, when people hear that the ocean is mostly unexplored, they imagine romance, lost worlds, monsters, treasure. The fantasy is old and understandable. But the more haunting truth is not that a giant monster may be waiting. It is that ordinary living systems, quiet and complex and irreplaceable, may be there right now, functioning in darkness, and we may destroy or alter them before we ever know their names. That is a different kind of mystery, less thrilling, more responsible. As of the mid-2020s, modern high-resolution mapping has covered only a portion of the global seafloor. Satellite data gives a broad outline, but broad outline is not intimacy. A blurred map can tell you there is a mountain. It cannot tell you what lives on it. It cannot show the small valleys where sediment gathers, the sponge fields, the coral gardens, the tracks of animals, the places where chemistry leaks from stone, the marks of human trash. the new forms waiting in plain darkness. Even more startling, the actual visually observed portion of the deep sea floor is so tiny that it becomes almost embarrassing to say aloud. Less than 0.001% by recent estimates. Less than the area of a small human political unit compared with an immensity covering much of the planet. Imagine claiming to understand a continent because you looked at a few parking spaces. That is our relationship with the deep. And yet, the deep is already in our politics. It is in arguments about mining. It is in climate models. It is in fisheries. It is in cable routes and naval strategy and carbon storage and biodiversity treaties and the hunger for critical minerals. It is in the invisible infrastructure of modern life, because undersea cables carry human conversation across ocean basins, because shipping crosses above abyssal plains, because the ocean absorbs heat and carbon from the atmosphere, because the weather we experience on land is tied to water we rarely see. The dark does not mean irrelevant. The dark means we have been making decisions with poor vision. That should frighten us more than a monster. Because monsters, if they existed, would at least be visible when they attacked. Ignorance is quieter. It lets us feel informed while standing at the edge of an unread world. It lets us discuss extraction from ecosystems we have barely visited. It lets us treat the deep as empty, because empty is economically convenient. There are minerals on the deep sea floor that human industries want. Manganese, nickel, cobalt, copper, rare earth elements. Nodules formed slowly over immense time lie on abyssal plains. Metal-rich crusts grow on seamounts. Sulfides form near vents. To a surface civilization trying to electrify, build batteries, harden supply chains, and feed an appetite for devices and infrastructure, the deep begins to look like a storehouse. But to the deep, those same places are habitats. A nodule is not just a lump of metal. It may be a surface for life in a place where hard surfaces are rare. A vent is not just a mineral chimney. It may be a living city powered by chemistry. A sediment plain is not just mud. It is a record, a carbon store, a slow habitat stitched together by animals we are still learning to see. The moral problem is not simple. That is important. The metals are real. The needs of a changing energy system are real. The harms of land mining are real. The desire to reduce one kind of damage by moving extraction elsewhere is understandable. But the deep asks an uncomfortable question. What happens when the elsewhere is not empty? What happens when the place we choose as sacrifice is simply the place too dark to protest? The ocean has no witness stand. It has no parliament. It has no way to tell us that a slow-growing sponge field matters, that a sediment community is ancient, that a species living on a nodule cannot simply relocate when the nodule is vacuumed away. It cannot make itself charismatic at the speed of media. It cannot compete emotionally with human jobs, battery supply chains, geopolitical urgency, or quarterly reports. The deep is at a disadvantage because it is quiet. And because it is quiet, we must become more careful, not less. This is where darkness becomes political, not as a metaphor, but as a condition. The harder a place is to see, the easier it is to simplify. The easier it is to simplify, the easier it is to exploit. The history of the surface world is full of landscapes misunderstood just long enough to be damaged. Forests called inexhaustible, rivers treated as drains, wetlands dismissed as wasteland, species ignored until absence became obvious. The deep may be the largest version of that pattern. Only here, the delay between damage and understanding could be longer than a human life. In the abyss, recovery is slow. Disturbance can remain visible for decades. Some communities grow at speeds that make human restoration fantasies feel naive. A machine track across sediment might last longer than the company that made it. A plume released into mid-water might move through food webs we have not mapped. A species removed before description becomes not an extinction story, but a missing sentence in a book we never opened. And somewhere beneath all of this, the ocean remains dark. Not morally dark, not evil, simply unlit. It does not become clearer because we need it to be useful. The camera on its frame may eventually touch bottom. It may stir a small cloud of sediment. It may land in a place no human eye has seen before, and for a few minutes, its lights may reveal a circle of seafloor in a radius smaller than a living room. Inside that circle, animals move. Outside it, the whole dark planet continues. A fish crosses the beam. A sea cucumber turns slowly through the sediment. A pale amphipod jerks away. Marine snow falls through the light and keeps falling after the light is gone. Then the timer expires. The battery weakens. The lamps shut off. And the camera, built by a species obsessed with vision, sits blind on the floor of a world that never needed light to continue. Let us come back now to space, because the comparison has been waiting for us. When we say space is dark, we usually mean that it looks black between stars. We mean that the sky beyond the atmosphere has no blue scattering, no soft dome, no daylight background. We mean that the universe is vast and mostly empty, and that human eyes are small instruments receiving only what reaches them. But space is also full of ancient visibility. Look up at night from a dark place, and you can see objects that are incomprehensibly far away. The Andromeda Galaxy appears as a faint blur to the naked eye under good conditions, its light traveling millions of years before entering your eye. A telescope gathers photons from galaxies so distant that their light began before Earth had complex life. Space is dark, but it is legible across distance in a way the deep ocean is not. The ocean defeats distance quickly. A diver can vanish from sight in water that is only mildly murky. A submersible's lights may reveal only meters or tens of meters ahead. Cameras encounter particles, backscatter, opacity. Sonar can map shape where light cannot, but sonar is not sight. It gives form without color, distance without intimacy, outlines without the soft immediacy of seeing. This is why the phrase "darker than space" is not just about brightness. It is about accessibility. Space can be observed from Earth. The deep cannot be observed from the surface in any meaningful visual way. The sky gives us ancient light for free. The ocean charges heavily for every image. In astronomy, the darkness between stars is part of what allows stars to be seen. In the deep ocean, the darkness and the medium cooperate to hide what is there. Space is a window with the lights off. The ocean is a locked room filled with black water. And yet we live beside it as if it is familiar. That familiarity may be the deepest illusion. Because everyone has a memory of the sea, even people who have never crossed it. The sound of waves, the smell of salt, the blue line in a painting, the word beach carrying warmth and childhood and escape. The ocean enters human emotion through its edges. We know the border and mistake it for the whole. A person can spend a lifetime loving the ocean and never encounter the ocean that makes up most of it. This is not their fault. No ordinary human can encounter it directly. But it should make us humble about our language. When we say ocean, we may be describing a vacation, a storm, a fishing ground, a shipping route, a view from a cliff, a memory of someone laughing in shallow water. All true, all partial. But beneath those meanings lies another ocean, vast and cold and unilluminated, where our metaphors begin to fail. The deep ocean is not the sea as scenery, it is the sea as planet. And the planet is darker than we imagined. There is a reason this realization carries emotional weight. The human mind associates light with care. We bring light into nurseries, hospitals, streets, homes. A lit window on a dark road means someone is awake, someone is present, someone has made a small claim against the night. Darkness in human life often means abandonment, or danger, or the unknown. But the deep ocean complicates that emotional inheritance, because the darkness down there is not abandonment, it is habitat. It is not a place where life failed to arrive, it is a place life adapted to so completely that sunlight would be the intrusion. It is not unfinished. It is not waiting to be lit by us so it can become meaningful. It is already meaningful in a register we barely understand. That is a hard lesson for a species that equates seeing with knowing. Maybe the deep teaches that knowledge is not the same as illumination. Maybe some worlds must be approached with restraint, with instruments designed not only to reveal, but to minimize harm. Maybe darkness can deserve protection. This is not romantic darkness. This is real darkness. Cold, pressurized, inhabited, and physically difficult. A darkness that can crush housings, swallow signals, and outlast civilizations. A darkness that has persisted under the bright surface through every empire, every war, every cathedral, every satellite launch, every love story, every extinction, every ordinary breakfast ever eaten by anyone near the shore. The deep was there before us. It will likely be there after us. That scale can feel cruel until it begins to feel freeing. To be small in the face of the ocean is not the same as being meaningless. It is to be returned to proportion. And proportion is something the surface world badly needs. The camera rises now in our imagination, or perhaps another instrument does. The winch reverses, the cable tightens, the frame lifts from the sea floor, leaving a faint mark in sediment that may remain long after the people on the ship have gone home. The lights come on again for the ascent, not because the deep needs them, but because we need reassurance that the machine is still there. The circle of seafloor drops away. The black closes underneath. Marine snow streams past in reverse. A sea cucumber, startled by the disturbance, resumes its slow, unfinished work. Above, kilometers of water wait. Ascending through the deep is not simply returning. It is being reminded how much lies between worlds. 4,000 meters, 3,000, 2. The midnight zone surrounds the instrument, unchanged by its visit. Lights from animals flicker and vanish. Predators continue their patient arithmetic. Tiny bodies carry their chemical lamps through a darkness older than human fear. At 1,000 meters, the border of sunlight is still ahead, though nothing in the camera can see it yet. There is only black, and then black with the faintest difference, and then a kind of blue so weak it feels imagined. The human mind wants thresholds to be clear. Doors, gates, lines. The ocean prefers gradients. It changes by accumulation until suddenly you realize the world is different. The first hint of daylight returns not as comfort, but as revelation. You understand, on the way up, how thin the visible world is. Downward, the loss of light felt like descent into mystery. Upward, the return of light feels almost fragile. The sunlit zone, which once seemed like the ocean itself, now appears as a shallow, illuminated film suspended over immensity. The blue surface from below is not the top of water. It is the ceiling of human perception. Imagine if we could feel that every time we stood on a beach. Imagine looking at waves and sensing not only their beauty, but the vertical world beneath them. The twilight animals preparing for night, the midnight creatures flashing messages in cold water, the marine snow falling, the vents smoking, the abyssal plains waiting, the trenches going deeper than mountains are tall, the unmapped seamounts, the species without names, the old carbon sinking, the mining claims, the plastic resting where sunlight has never gone, the cables carrying our voices through darkness. The ocean would stop being a view. It would become a thickness, a layered, breathing, mostly hidden earth. And perhaps that would change how we love it. Not less, more honestly. The instrument breaks the surface at last. Water streams from the frame. The lens emerges into air. The deck crew pulls it aboard. Someone laughs from relief. Someone checks the housing for damage. Someone removes a memory card with gloved hands and carries it inside as if it were something fragile and ceremonial, which it is. Hours of darkness compressed into data. A few circles of light recovered from a world that did not consent to be simplified. Later, in a lab or a shipboard room, people watch the footage. At first, it may seem disappointing. Black water, snow, a few animals, a stretch of bottom, a field of sediment, a flash, another flash, a creature too quick to identify. A long interval where nothing obvious happens. But the longer you watch, the more the disappointment becomes embarrassment. Because the problem is not that little is happening. The problem is that we do not yet know how to read what happens slowly. This may be the central challenge of the deep ocean. Not darkness alone. Literacy. We are illiterate in the largest habitat on Earth. We can gather data, yes. We can map, sample, classify, sequence, model, and name. But literacy is deeper than information. Literacy means recognizing pattern, consequence, relationship, mood. It means knowing what a track implies, what a silence signals, what an absence warms, what a change in particle flow might mean for animals far below. It means understanding the deep not as an inventory of resources or curiosities, but as a living system with histories and dependencies. We are at the alphabet stage, and yet our machines are already capable of damage at paragraph scale. That is why the darkness matters. Darkness slows knowledge, but it does not slow appetite. A mining machine does not need to understand an ecosystem in order to disturb it. A trawl does not need to read a coral's growth rings before breaking it. Plastic does not need a map to reach the trench. Noise does not need permission to travel. Carbon does not ask whether a sink is well studied before the climate begins to change. The deep is hidden from sight, not from consequence. And this is where the story becomes less comfortable than wonder. Because wonder alone can become a way of keeping distance. We marvel, then move on. We call the deep mysterious, then use that mystery as a cushion against responsibility. But mystery is not an excuse for carelessness. If anything, it is the opposite. The less we know, the more careful we should be with what we touch. There is an old human instinct to treat unseen places as empty until proven otherwise. The deep ocean is the greatest rebuke to that instinct on Earth. Every decade, it proves the opposite. Darkness contains life. Pressure contains adaptation. Chemical vents contain ecosystems. Sediments contain histories. Unmapped seamounts contain habitats. Animals thought impossible appear in the beam and vanish back into blackness. The unseen is not empty. The unseen is simply unseen. That sentence sounds obvious, It is not how civilizations behave. Civilizations behave as if visibility creates value. The deep asks us to outgrow that. A child looking at the sea from shore sees a surface that moves. A sailor sees weather and hazard. A fisher sees grounds and seasons. A shipping company sees routes. A navy sees acoustic space. A miner sees deposits. A climate scientist sees heat and carbon. A biologist sees habitat. A poet sees longing. None of them are wrong, but none of them are complete. The ocean is the sum of all those meanings, plus the darkness that exceeds them. And it is the exceeding that should humble us. Let us go deeper again. Not with the instrument this time, but with the idea of darkness itself. What is darkness? On land, darkness is often blocked light. A mountain casts a shadow. A wall interrupts a lamp. Night arrives because Earth turns its face away from the sun. In every case, darkness feels relational. It depends on where you stand relative to a source. In the ocean, darkness becomes cumulative. It is not only that something blocks the sun. The medium between you and the sun absorbs and scatters the light until the source has no practical meaning. You could draw a straight line upward from the midnight zone to the sunlit surface, and still no usable daylight would travel down that line. There is no object casting the shadow. The water itself is the shadow. That is why deep-sea darkness feels so absolute. It is not the shadow of a thing. It is the shadow of an entire ocean. And because the ocean moves, the shadow is alive in its own way. Particles drift through it. Currents slide through it. Animals make brief exceptions to it with living light. But the condition remains. A planetary thickness of water stands between the deep and the star. In space, if you leave the shadow of a planet, the sun returns with brutal simplicity. In the deep, there is no leaving the shadow unless you rise through the world. That makes the ocean's darkness vertical, embodied, earned meter by meter. It is not a backdrop, it is a descent. Perhaps that is why it affects the imagination differently than night. Night is above you. The deep is below you. Night passes. The deep remains. Night reveals stars. The deep hides almost everything. And yet, strangely, the deep may be less empty than a clear night sky appears to the naked eye. A person under stars sees points separated by black. A camera in the deep, if sensitive enough and patient enough, may be surrounded by organisms, signals, particles, traces of life, chemical gradients, sounds, pressures, and histories. The ocean's darkness is crowded. Crowded darkness is different from empty darkness. It makes the unseen feel close. That closeness is part of the fear. A dark room is frightening because something might be near. Deep water is frightening because something is near, even if not something with teeth, even if not something hostile. The water itself is near. The pressure is near. The cold is near. The unknown animals are near. The particles of death are near. The whole hidden planet presses around the imagination. And then there is sound. Sound travels through the ocean in ways light cannot. Where light is consumed, sound can go on. Whales call across distances that would dwarf human shouting into absurdity. Earthquakes rumble through basins. Ice cracks. Ships grind and throb. Sonar pings. Rain strikes the surface and becomes a texture below. The ocean may be dark, but it is not silent. This matters because darkness tends to make us imagine absence. Sound corrects that. It says, there is activity beyond the beam. There are bodies moving. There is geology shifting. There are storms above, even if their light does not reach. There are human machines far away, their propellers riding industrial noise into water that once carried mostly biological and geological signals. The deep listens whether or not we intend to speak. And increasingly, we are loud. This is one of the hidden consequences of becoming a planetary species. Our presence enters environments before our bodies do. Noise travels, chemicals travel, plastics sink, heat penetrates, carbon alters pH, fishing lines descend. Light from vessels changes surface waters. Even when we do not visit the deep, parts of our civilization do. A plastic bag can reach a trench more easily than a person can. That sentence should feel impossible, and yet it is not. The deepest places on Earth are not beyond us in the moral sense. They are beyond our bodies, beyond our easy perception, beyond our daily concern. But our waste can find them. Our sound can enter them. Our climate can change them. Our markets can target them. We are powerful enough to affect what we are not wise enough to understand. This is a very human predicament. Power arriving before humility. The ocean's darkness does not protect it from us as much as we once might have thought. It protects it from being loved clearly. It protects it from easy empathy. It lets damage remain abstract. It allows distance to masquerade as depth, and depth to masquerade as emptiness. But the camera footage contradicts that abstraction. A pale animal moves through the beam. A field of manganese nodules lies across a plain, each one surrounded by lives too small or slow to be noticed in a quick survey. A deep coral rises like a fragile hand from stone. A fish hovers in water so black that the animal seems to have invented itself out of nothing. Once you see even a little, the category empty becomes impossible to use honestly. And that is why exploration matters. Not conquest, not flag planting, not the old heroic language of mastering a frontier. Exploration as attention. Exploration as the discipline of replacing assumption with encounter. The practice of learning enough to be less reckless. The humility of sending instruments into darkness, not to claim it, but to realize how much claim would be premature. Space exploration has taught us awe through distance. Deep sea exploration teaches awe through proximity. Space says, you are small because the universe is vast. The ocean says, you are small because even your own planet exceeds you. One is cosmic humility. The other is intimate humility. The intimate one may be harder, because it means the unknown was never far enough away to excuse our ignorance. It was beneath the boat, beneath the weather, beneath the map, beneath the word ocean itself. There is another descent I want you to imagine. Not a camera this time, not a body, not a submarine, a memory. Take one ordinary human memory and lower it through the sea. A kitchen in the morning, someone washing a cup, a message arriving, a person standing at a window while rain taps the glass, a hand on a shoulder, a small argument, a laugh that ends too quickly. The kind of moment no historian records, but a life is made of. Lower it into the sunlight zone, and it still feels human. There is warmth, motion, blue light, fish turning. The memory remains intact. Lower it into the twilight, and the colors drain. The faces become harder to see. The sounds of the kitchen are gone. The memory begins to lose the environment that made it ordinary. It becomes emotional shape without detail. Lower it into the midnight zone, and it becomes almost absurd. Human concern suspended in a darkness where no surface urgency exists. Bills, Deadlines, pride, embarrassment, ambition, gossip, the thousand small tyrannies of daily life. Down there, they do not vanish because they were meaningless. They vanish because they belonged to a narrow band of conditions. This is not contempt for human life. It is context. And context can be merciful. The deep does not tell us that our lives do not matter. It tells us that our lives are not the scale by which everything else must be measured. It invites, or forces, the possibility that importance can exist without centrality. A deep-sea amphipod matters in its world. A vent bacterium matters in its chemistry. A whale carcass matters as a temporary continent of food on the seafloor. A human memory matters to the humans who hold it. None of these meanings require the universe to be arranged around them. The ocean is vast enough to let many kinds of meaning exist without asking them to compete. That may be one reason the ending of a deep ocean story should not be triumphant. There is no victory over this darkness. The best we can do is enter briefly, carefully, learn something, and return changed enough to behave differently. The great explorers of the deep did not conquer the trench. The Trieste did not conquer it. James Cameron did not conquer it. Victor Vescovo did not conquer it. Every descent was temporary. Every machine returned, or failed to. The trench remained. The pressure remained. The darkness remained. Human arrival was an event. The deep was the condition. We love stories where the human being reaches the impossible place, and the impossible place becomes a stage for human greatness. The ocean quietly ruins that story, because the deepest place on Earth does not become human when we arrive. We become, briefly, Hadal. We borrow survival from metal and engineering. We sit inside a sphere or a titanium hull while water presses with a force that would end us instantly. We look through a small window at a world that does not know we are heroic. We take notes. We make history among ourselves. Then we drop weights, rise for hours, break the surface, and tell the story in air. The deep does not applaud. That silence is not an insult. It is truth. In January 1960, Jacques Piccard and Don Walsh descended in the bathyscaphe Trieste to the Challenger Deep, the deepest known region of the ocean. The descent took hours. The craft was strange by modern standards, a gasoline-filled float and a steel pressure sphere, an engineering compromise shaped by the fact that the deep does not care what looks elegant. During the dive, an outer window cracked. They continued. At the bottom, they spent only a short time before returning. More than half a century passed before another human reached that depth in person. Think about that. In the decades between, humanity went to the moon, sent probes beyond the outer planets, built space stations, sequenced genomes, connected continents with fiber optic cables, and placed satellites around Earth until the night side of the planet became webbed with signals. But the deepest point in our own ocean remained almost unvisited by human beings. That fact is often used as a dramatic comparison. More people have gone to space than to the deepest sea. It is a useful comparison, but it can become too neat. The real meaning is stranger than a statistic. It says that accessibility is not the same as distance. The moon is far away, but once you solve certain problems, the vacuum between here and there is mostly empty. The trench is close, but every meter downward intensifies the conditions against you. The moon can be looked at before you go. The trench hides even while you stand above it. The moon became a destination. The trench remained a pressure. That difference shaped imagination, funding, culture, and myth. Space became the future. The deep remained the beneath. But beneath is not backward. Beneath is where the planet stores some of its oldest questions. Where did life begin? How flexible can biology be? What chemistries can sustain ecosystems without sunlight? How does carbon move from air to water to sediment? How much heat can the ocean absorb before its patterns change? How many species exist in darkness? What happens when human noise reaches animals that depend on sound? What are we destroying before we have names for it? These questions are not smaller because they point downward. They may be among the largest questions we have. And they are waiting in the dark. The camera descent becomes, by now, more than a journey through water. It becomes a correction of attention. Each layer corrects a surface assumption. The sunlight zone corrects the idea that the visible ocean is the whole ocean. The twilight zone corrects the idea that dimness means emptiness. The midnight zone corrects the idea that darkness is silence or death. The abyss corrects the idea that the seafloor is a simple bottom. The vents correct the idea that sunlight is the only foundation of life. The hadal trenches correct the idea that the planet's extremes are somewhere else. And the comparison with space corrects the idea that darkness means distance. Sometimes darkness is nearby. Sometimes darkness is under your feet. Sometimes the unknown is close enough that a child can throw a stone toward it from a pier. The stone will not reach the abyss, of course. It will slow, sink, vanish. But the gesture is enough. A small human arm, a splash, a circle widening on the surface, and beneath that circle, a vertical universe continues downward, far beyond the imagination of the thrower. There is something tender in that, not because the child is foolish, because all of us live that way. We make small circles on the surface of things. We watch them widen and think we have understood the water. The ocean's darkness also changes how we should think about fear. Fear of deep water is common, and it is easy to mock until you consider what the fear is actually sensing. The person afraid of dark water may not know the terminology of pelagic zones or light attenuation. They may not know about the aphotic zone or marine snow or hadal trenches. But the body understands something older than knowledge. It understands that below the surface, the rules change quickly. It understands that water hides depth, that depth hides distance, that distance hides inability. A clear swimming pool is safe because the bottom is visible. A lake becomes unsettling when the bottom disappears. The open ocean becomes existential because the bottom is not part of the experience at all. You float on a surface, and beneath you is not ground, but volume. Human comfort often depends on knowing what supports us. On land, the answer is simple: ground. At sea, the answer is more fragile: buoyancy, weather, a hull, luck. In deep water, if those fail, there is no reachable support. The dark beneath becomes not merely a place, but a consequence. That is why the ocean can feel predatory even when calm. It does not have to move toward you. It only has to wait for the boundary to break. And yet, fear alone cannot be the final relationship. If we only fear the deep, we will avoid it or exploit it from a distance. If we only romanticize it, we will turn it into aesthetic darkness and miss its material reality. The task is harder: to fear accurately, wonder honestly, and care without needing the deep to become human. Accurate fear is a form of respect. The deep deserves that. Not because it is sacred in a sentimental way, though some may feel it is. Not because it is pure, because no place on earth is untouched now by human influence. But because it is vast, old, complex, and still mostly unknown. Because it holds lives adapted to conditions we can barely endure in machines. Because it helps regulate the climate of the only planet we have. Because it may preserve clues to origins, futures, and forms of survival we have not imagined. And because darkness does not make a place disposable. That sentence may be the moral center of the whole descent. Darkness does not make a place disposable. The ocean is darker than space, and yet it is not empty, not silent, not irrelevant, not waiting for us to assign it value. Its darkness is a condition of life, not a cancellation of life. Its invisibility is our limitation, not its lack. The more you sit with that, the more the title changes. At first, the ocean gets darker than space sounds like a strange fact, a hook, an atmospheric contradiction. Then it becomes physics, then biology, then exploration, then politics, then humility. By the end, it becomes a way of seeing the surface differently. Or rather, a way of not mistaking the surface for everything. Let us descend now toward the deepest layer, because there is a particular darkness there that is not merely optical. Below 6,000 meters, the ocean enters the Hadal Zone, named after the underworld of myth. The name feels theatrical until you consider the reality. These depths exist mainly in trenches, where one plate of Earth's crust bends beneath another, and the seafloor drops into long, narrow scars. They are not broad, common landscapes like abyssal plains. They are isolated pockets of extreme depth, separated from one another by vast regions of merely deep ocean. Merely deep. That phrase itself shows how scale has shifted. At 6,000 meters, pressure is immense. Temperature is near freezing. Sunlight is not a memory, it is a condition that has never applied. The animals living there are not simply deep-sea animals. They are hadal animals, adapted to a more severe equation. Their proteins, membranes, bones, enzymes, and behaviors must function under pressure that challenges the chemistry of life. And yet the Hadal Zone is alive. Not in the crowded, colorful way a reef is alive. Not in a way designed to comfort the human eye, but alive in pale, quiet, startling forms. Amphipods, snailfish, sea cucumbers, microbial communities, strange, soft bodies moving along sediments at the bottom of trenches. Life does not stop where our intuition expects it to. It narrows, changes, becomes specialized, finds the edge, then lives there. There is a kind of philosophical danger in this. Every time humans declare a place impossible, life seems to answer with the technicality. Not everywhere, not always, but often enough to make arrogance risky. We once thought the deep was too dark. Then came bioluminescence, marine snow, chemosynthesis. We thought the vents too toxic. Then came ecosystems. We thought the pressure too much. Then came hadal fish. We thought the bottom too remote. Then came plastic. The deep keeps correcting us. A descent into the hadal is also a descent into geology. The trench is not just a deep hole. It is part of planetary movement. The seafloor is being bent, forced, recycled. The Earth is not a static ball with oceans lying neatly on top. It is active beneath the water. Plates converge, sediments slide. Earthquakes begin in darkness. Tsunamis may be born from motions no one sees. The abyss is not merely biological mystery. It is the planet's machinery, partly hidden under black water. This matters because it breaks another surface illusion. We often picture the ocean as fluid lying over solid ground. But in trenches, the distinction between ocean and earth becomes more intimate. Water fills a wound made by moving crust. Sediments collect in a place shaped by tectonic force. Life inhabits the seam where the planet folds. At the Challenger Deep, the numbers become almost unusable emotionally. Nearly 11 kilometers of water, more than 35,000 feet. A depth greater than the height of Everest. Pressure more than 1,000 times that at sea level. Numbers can anesthetize awe if repeated too often, so do not treat this as trivia. Treat it as separation. A human at the surface and the floor of Challenger Deep are divided by conditions so different that both places, though on the same planet, feel like different categories of existence. One has wind, weather, sunlight, clouds, breath, sound in air, skin warmed by radiation from a nearby star. The other has black water, near freezing cold, crushing pressure, sediments, amphipods, microbial life, and the weight of an entire ocean overhead. The vertical distance is only 11 kilometers. The experiential distance is almost total. That is how Earth hides worlds. Not by placing them far away, by stacking them. The Hadal darkness is not darker because black can become blacker in ordinary perception. It is darker because the distance from the surface has accumulated into a kind of existential insulation. No sunrise arrives. No season arrives directly. No human unaided arrives. No casual witness arrives. The trench is not dark like a room at night. It is dark like a sealed chapter in the planet's own body. And still, even there, our traces arrive. This is perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all. The deep, which seemed beyond us, is not beyond our consequences. Sampling at Hadal depths has found human-made contaminants in organisms. Expeditions have seen litter. Plastic and chemical signatures travel farther down than human concern. The ocean becomes darker than space, but not distant enough to escape us. That should make triumph impossible. We cannot stand proudly above the deep as explorers only. We also stand implicated. The darkness we barely understand is already receiving the byproducts of the world we built in the light. And here the ocean's darkness becomes a mirror. Not a mirror like the surface, reflecting sunlight and faces. A moral mirror. It shows us what our civilization is like when it reaches places no one is watching. It asks whether care depends on visibility. It asks whether the unseen can be included in our idea of responsibility. It asks whether we are capable of protecting a world whose beauty is often inaccessible, whose creatures cannot become mascots easily, whose damage may not produce viral images until long after decisions are made. It asks whether mystery can be enough. Enough to slow us, enough to humble us, enough to keep our machines from arriving before our understanding. There is a temptation at this point to turn the story into apocalypse, to say the deep is doomed, the darkness ruined, the ocean's final secrets already lost. But that would be too easy, and not entirely true. The deep is vulnerable, but it is not passive. It is changing, yes, and affected, yes, and far from untouched. But it is also enormous, dynamic, and full of processes beyond our control. The point is not to declare it dead before we know it. The point is to recognize that our choices still matter, precisely because the deep is alive. Hope in the deep ocean cannot be bright hope. It cannot be the easy sunlight hope of quick recovery and visible restoration. It has to be a darker hope, slower, more disciplined. The hope of mapping before mining, listening before increasing noise, studying before simplifying, protecting representative habitats before exploitation becomes momentum, designing instruments that disturb less, funding patient science, teaching the public that darkness is not emptiness. A darker hope may be the only kind appropriate to a dark world. Not despair, not spectacle, attention. If attention can become policy, if policy can become restraint, if restraint can become a habit strong enough to survive profit, then perhaps the deep has a chance to remain not pristine, because that word may already be gone, but complex, functioning, partially unknown in the best sense, unknown not because we refused to learn, but because we learned without consuming everything. There is dignity in leaving some darkness unviolated. That may sound strange from a species built around curiosity, but mature curiosity is not the same as exposure. Mature curiosity knows that seeing is a relationship. It asks what the act of seeing costs. It asks whether a sample is necessary, whether a light is too bright, whether a route matters, whether an image justifies disturbance. It does not treat the world as content. The deep ocean, maybe more than any place on Earth, demands mature curiosity. Because immature curiosity will arrive with floodlights and extractors and call itself destiny. We have done that before. The deep remembers in its own way, not as memory like ours, not stories, not grief, but traces, sediment disturbance, chemical signatures, missing animals, changed soundscapes, debris on the sea floor. The planet keeps records whether or not we read them. Marine snow records the surface, sediment records time, ice records atmosphere, coral records temperature, shells record chemistry, and perhaps the deep sea floor will record the moment when a surface species became powerful enough to reach down before it became wise enough to kneel. That is not inevitable, but it is possible, and possibility is where responsibility lives. The darkness continues. Let us return to the human scale once more, because without it, the deep becomes only abstraction. Imagine the person on the ship after the instrument returns. It is late. The deck is wet. The horizon has lost color. The data drive is in a case on the table. In the galley, someone has left a mug beside a sink. The ship hums. People are tired, in the specific way field scientists get tired, a mixture of physical work, anticipation, boredom, and awe, kept under professional control. On a screen, the footage plays. Black water, snow, a flash, nothing, more snow, a shape. The person watching leans closer. There is always a moment like that in exploration. Not the cinematic moment, the quiet one. The moment someone leans closer because the world has offered a clue so small it could be missed. A pale limb at the edge of frame, a track in sediment, a glimmer where none was expected, a behavior not in the literature, a species perhaps known, perhaps not. A question forming before the funding exists to answer it. That leaning closer may be one of the noblest human gestures. Not conquering, not claiming, leaning closer. It is the opposite of indifference. It says the small thing matters. It says the faint evidence is worth attention. It says the world is not obligated to reveal itself in proportion to our impatience. The deep teaches that kind of looking. Slow looking. Looking that admits its own inadequacy. Looking that can be changed by what it sees. We need more of that. Not only in ocean science, everywhere. But the ocean is a good teacher because it refuses shortcuts. You cannot motivationally think your way through pressure. You cannot brand your way past physics. You cannot replace long observation with confidence. You cannot fake a descent. The deep is an antidote to performance because it remains itself when no one is watching, and most of it is never watched. That is the hardest part to hold. Right now, while this sentence is being spoken, the deep ocean is happening. Not in the past, not in a documentary, not as footage. Now. In darkness under the Atlantic, something flashes and goes unseen. In the Pacific twilight, animals are preparing for the nightly ascent. In the Southern Ocean, particles sink through cold water. Along a ridge, hot vent fluid rises into blackness, and bacteria turn chemistry into life. In a trench, amphipods move over sediment under pressure that would erase us. Somewhere, a whale calls, and sound travels through layers no light can cross. Somewhere, a piece of plastic settles among animals that did not evolve for our century. Somewhere, a species no human has named is alive for reasons perfectly sufficient to itself. The deep does not begin when we film it. It does not end when we look away. The ocean's darkness is continuous with our bright days. It exists under weddings, wars, elections, markets, storms, holidays, funerals, morning commutes, late-night messages, every human drama staged in air. Under all of it, the dark water carries on. That simultaneity is almost too large to feel. But try. While sunlight crosses your window, darkness holds most of the ocean. While you look up at the moon, deeper darkness exists beneath waves. While space captures the imagination with distance, the sea holds an unknown more intimate than the stars. Maybe this is why the ocean feels, at times, older than the sky. Not older in a literal cosmic sense. The stars are older, the universe older still, but emotionally older. The sea touches the origin of life, the chemistry of cells, the first migrations of matter through water, the long before of bodies. Space makes us think of destiny. The ocean makes us think of memory. The deep ocean especially feels like the planet remembering before we arrived. It remembers darkness before eyes, chemistry before forests, pressure before lungs, currents before roads, hunger before language. It remembers a world where life did not need to be seen to exist. And when we descend into it, even through imagination, we encounter not the future only, but an ancient present, a now that has been going on for a very long time. The ocean gets darker than space because it is not trying to show us the universe. It is keeping the Earth's interior night. There is one last scientific irony worth holding gently. The darkness of the deep is partly what makes the surface possible. The ocean stores heat. It moves carbon. It supports food webs. It regulates climate patterns. Marine snow carries the products of sunlit life downward. Deep circulation helps shape the long memory of the climate system. The dark is not separate from the light. It supports and receives it. The bright world sends its dead downward. The dark world stores, transforms, consumes, and returns influence in ways that shape the surface. We are not living above an irrelevant abyss. We are living above a partner we barely understand. That partnership is not sentimental. It includes death, pressure, decay, predation, cold, and long intervals of hunger. But surface life is not sentimental either. Forests are built on rot. Soil is full of digestion. Coral reefs are competitive cities. Human bodies live by eating other life. The deep is not uniquely harsh. It is simply harsh in conditions unfamiliar to us. When we call the deep alien, sometimes we are protecting ourselves from recognizing the continuity. It is Earth. We are Earth. The same planet that made flowers made anglerfish. The same planet that made songbirds made ventworms. The same planet that made wheat fields made abyssal mud. The same planet that made human eyes made creatures that erase their silhouettes with light. The darkness is not outside nature. It is nature, with our preferred lights removed. And perhaps that is why it feels so honest. At the end of the descent, there is no grand answer that makes the deep comfortable. The ocean remains darker than space. It remains close and hidden, beautiful and dangerous, vulnerable and immense. It remains full of life that does not need us and affected by us anyway. It remains a place where light fails, but life does not. That may be enough. Not every mystery needs to become a solution in order to change us. Some mysteries change us by staying vast. The surface, meanwhile, keeps shining. Waves lift and fall. Sunlight breaks open on the water. A gull crosses the wind. A ship passes over kilometers of darkness with its engines turning and its crew thinking about weather, schedules, meals, home. Beneath the hull, the blue becomes dim, the dim becomes black, and the black continues down through layers of animals, snow, pressure, geology, and time. No one on deck can see it, but it is there. A whole dark architecture under the bright skin of the world. Once you know that, the sea never looks flat again. It becomes difficult to look at any horizon over water and see only distance. The real distance is vertical. The real mystery is not where the ocean meets the sky, but where the sunlight runs out beneath the waves. That is the boundary we almost never mark on maps. The invisible border between the world that can be seen and the world that must be imagined, measured, entered by machines, and approached with humility. Somewhere under that boundary, an animal makes light. Somewhere below that, another waits in darkness for food that began as sunlight. Somewhere below that, a plain lies almost untouched by human sight. Somewhere below that, a trench folds into the earth. And somewhere through all of it, darkness is not an ending. It is the medium. Perhaps the final mistake is thinking darkness is a single thing. There is the darkness of space, vast and transparent, filled with old light moving through emptiness. There is the darkness of night, temporary and familiar, turning the surface toward rest. There is the darkness of grief, interior and human, where memory keeps glowing after presence disappears. And there is the darkness of the ocean, physical and living, a pressure-thick darkness full of bodies, signals, hunger, patience, and time. They are not the same darkness. The ocean's darkness is heavier. It has weight. It has temperature. It has depth. It touches everything inside it. And because it touches, because it presses, because it absorbs, because it contains, it feels more complete than the black beyond the atmosphere. Space may be larger beyond comprehension, but it is also thin. The ocean is immediate, dense, intimate. It surrounds. It enters any weakness. It turns light into heat, and bodies into food, and curiosity into humility. That is why the phrase stays in the mind. The ocean gets darker than space. Not more vast, not more cosmic. Darker. A darkness you could lower a light into and watch that light become small. A darkness close enough to sail over. A darkness alive enough to answer with a glow of its own. There is another way to understand this darkness, and it begins not with a diver, or a submarine, or a camera, but with the smallest imaginable traveler. A photon leaves the sun. It is born in violence. Not the gentle yellow disk we draw as children, but a star's interior pressure, fusion, collisions, energy struggling outward through plasma until, after a journey so tangled it almost loses the meaning of direction, it escapes into space. Once free, it crosses the void at the speed of light. 8 minutes later, it reaches Earth. It has crossed a distance so large that no bird, no ship, no human life could make sense of it physically. And yet, for light, the journey is ordinary. The photon enters the atmosphere. Air catches some of its companions and scatters them blue, giving us the sky. Clouds reflect others. Leaves absorb some and turn them into sugar. Skin absorbs some and turns warm. Solar panels convert some into electricity. Oceans reflect a glittering fraction back upward, bright enough to dazzle anyone looking from the deck of a ship. But some photons enter the water. This is where the cosmic journey becomes intimate. A photon that crossed empty space for 93 million miles can die in the first meters of the sea. Not die in the living sense, but end as visible light. It is absorbed by water molecules, by particles, by dissolved matter, by the suspended dust of the ocean. Its energy becomes microscopic warmth, spread so thinly it no longer carries an image. It no longer tells an eye that something is red, or orange, or alive. It no longer participates in sight. This is the ocean's great reversal. Space is vast, but permissive. The sea is close, but selective. Space allows light to travel almost absurd distances if nothing interrupts it. The ocean interrupts constantly. It is an archive that refuses most illumination at the door. That is why the deep does not simply look dark. It is dark by process. 1 trillion tiny acts of absorption have happened above it. The water overhead has filtered the universe. The darkness at depth is not a lack that was always there. It is the result of light being spent. Every meter downward is a receipt. Something has been paid. Color, heat, clarity, signal, familiarity. All of it spent into the water before reaching the world below. And the deeper you go, the less useful it becomes to speak of the sun as present. The sun is present gravitationally, climatically, biologically, historically. But visually, in the deep, it has been defeated. The same star that throws shadows behind mountains cannot send one meaningful beam to the abyss. That should make the abyss feel less like a basement and more like an interior. The ocean has an inside. We are used to planets having surfaces. Land is surface, sea is surface, maps are surfaces. Photographs from space show a blue marble, luminous and whole, a single object turning in sunlight. But that image, beautiful as it is deceptive in the way all surfaces are deceptive. It shows the skin of the earth, not its rooms. The ocean is not a blue wrapping, it is a volume, and most of that volume is dark. This is where language begins to betray us. We say the ocean floor, as if the important thing is the bottom. We say sea level, as if the important thing is the line where air meets water. We say depth, as if darkness is just distance measured downward. But the ocean is not a hallway ending at a floor. It is an immense, inhabited thickness. a vertical wilderness, a planet within the planet. The twilight zone is not just a band on a diagram. It is a world with laws. The midnight zone is not just a lower category. It is an empire of black water. The abyss is not just bottomland. It is the largest landscape on Earth. The Hadal trenches are not just pits. They are isolated deep provinces where pressure and chemistry write their own rules. When a photon fails to reach them, it is not merely a scientific fact. It means those worlds developed without the constant visual supervision of the star. They are not sunlit worlds that lost the sun. They are dark worlds that learned to be worlds anyway. And this is why the ocean unsettles the human imagination so powerfully. We tend to believe that to see something is to grant it reality. A thing in darkness becomes uncertain. A thing unphotographed becomes almost mythical. A species unseen becomes hypothetical to anyone outside the field. Entire habitats can remain emotionally unreal because no bright image of them circulates through human culture. But the deep existed before images. It existed before eyes. It existed before there were brains anywhere on Earth capable of being afraid of it. Darkness is older than vision. That one sentence changes the emotional balance. We act as if darkness is what happens when light leaves a seeing creature alone. But darkness came first. The universe before stars was dark. The early ocean before complex eyes was dark to no one, because there was no one to define it that way. The deep sea was not deprived, it simply was. Vision arrived later, a brilliant accident, a survival strategy, a way of extracting information from photons. And then, because we are visual creatures, we rewrote reality around sight. The deep never agreed to that rewrite. It kept living by chemistry, pressure, touch, smell, vibration, faint light, patience, and hunger. In some deep-sea animals, the eye becomes enormous because so little light exists that every photon matters. In others, eyes shrink or disappear because light has become irrelevant. Some animals invest in transparency, others in blackness so complete it swallows the faint glow around them. Some fish are darker than ordinary black, their skin structured to absorb almost all light that hits it, making them vanish in a world where even a stray reflection can betray a body to a predator. Think about that. On land, black is a color. In the deep, black can be armor. Not armor against teeth, but against perception. A fish can survive by becoming a hole in the world. There is something psychologically unnerving about that adaptation, a creature shaped not to be seen. A body evolved to remove itself from the visual field, not hiding behind something, not fleeing into cover, becoming cover, becoming the absence into which eyes fall and fail. The deep did not invent invisibility as magic. It invented it as survival. And in doing so, it reveals a truth about vision that we prefer not to notice. To be seen is often to be vulnerable. The surface world teaches the opposite. We want recognition. We want visibility. We want to be known, witnessed, validated. But in the twilight and midnight ocean, visibility is a bargain with death. A silhouette is a confession. A sparkle is a mistake. A shape against the faint sky is a meal announcing itself. So life down there develops an ethics of concealment. Glow only when glowing helps. Reflect only what must be reflected. Absorb everything else. It is a world where attention itself is dangerous. And then humans arrive with lights. There is comedy in it, if the comedy were not so intrusive. A species of daylight animals lowers a device into darkness and floods the scene with brightness, then calls the startled animals strange. We see a fish open its mouth, a squid vanish, a jelly pulse, and we narrate their mystery. But perhaps, from the deep's side of the encounter, we are the mystery. A violent rectangle of artificial noon descending out of nowhere, attached to metal, humming, hot, and temporary. To us, the deep is alien. To the deep, we are the impossible weather. This reversal matters. It shifts the story from we explore an empty darkness to we intrude briefly into someone else's dark. Someone, not in the human legal sense, but in the ecological sense. A world of beings whose lives have structure, needs, strategies, and continuity without us. We are not entering a void. We are entering a habitat that our senses misread as void because we are bad at sensing it. This is one of the most important philosophical lessons of the ocean. Ignorance often feels like emptiness from the inside. When you do not know what you are missing, the missing does not announce itself. The abyss can look blank because the camera frame is narrow. The sediment can look barren because the life is small or slow or buried. The water can look empty because the animals are transparent or beyond the beam or gone before the lights arrive. The darkness can look dead because we have confused our inability to see with nature's failure to be. The deep ocean is the world telling us, your senses are not the measure of reality. For a surface species, that is difficult medicine. We built civilizations around extension of the senses. Fire extended sight into night. Writing extended memory. Telescopes extended vision into space. Microscopes extended vision into cells. Cameras extended presence. Satellites extended maps. Sonar, remotely operated vehicles, autonomous floats, pressure sensors, chemical samplers. All of them are acts of sensory ambition. We refuse to remain confined to what the body can know unaided. This refusal is beautiful. It is also risky, because every extension of the senses can become an extension of appetite. The same technologies that reveal can enable extraction. The same maps that guide conservation can guide mining. The same lights that show a coral garden can make it easier to cut a route through it. Knowledge is not automatically protection. It becomes protection only when joined to values. The deep is testing whether our values can descend as far as our machines. So far, the answer is unfinished. Long before modern sensors, humans measured the deep with weight and line. It is worth lingering with that image because it is almost painfully humble. A ship in open water, a line lowered over the side, a weight sinking through darkness. Men waiting for slack, for touch, for some sign that the bottom had been reached, the ocean refusing haste. The line unwinding into a blue that becomes black long before any bottom answers. Sounding the depths was not just measurement, it was conversation with the unknown, using the simplest possible sentence. How far down are you? Sometimes the answer came back wrong. Sometimes the line drifted. Sometimes currents dragged it. Sometimes the bottom was misread. But slowly, painfully, humans began to learn that the ocean floor was not a smooth basin. It had ridges, plains, trenches, mountains, canyons, fracture zones. The hidden landscape was as dramatic as anything on land, only drowned and dark. This realization changed the ocean from a surface to a geography. Before that, the sea had depth, but not much imagined terrain. Sailors knew shoals, reefs, banks, dangerous coasts. Fishermen knew grounds. But the deep sea floor was often a blank beneath a blank. Then measurements accumulated, then sonar, then multi-beam mapping, then submersibles, then remotely operated vehicles. The black below the ships began to acquire shape. But even now, shape is not enough. A map of the seafloor is a beginning, not an encounter. A mountain drawn in sonar is not the same as seeing the animals on its slopes. A trench outlined in bathymetry is not the same as understanding its currents, microbes, sediments, and food webs. A map can reduce fear by giving form, but it can also create a false feeling of possession. We are very good at thinking that what has been mapped has been known. The deep resists that confusion. To map is not to know. To name is not to understand. To reach is not to belong. These distinctions matter in the history of exploration because human beings have often blurred them for convenience. We arrived somewhere, named it, placed it on a map, and treated that as a kind of ownership. The deep ocean makes ownership absurd at a physical level. No flag stands in abyssal sediment without immediate dependence on ships, treaties, machines, and the permission of pressure. No border holds a current. No claim makes darkness habitable. And yet, legal and economic claims descend anyway. This is how the old surface habits enter the new dark. A place becomes legible to markets before it becomes legible to ethics. The abyssal plain becomes a resource zone. The nodule field becomes a deposit. The vent field becomes mineral potential. The seamount becomes a target. The language changes first, and the imagination follows. Once a place is described primarily by what can be taken from it, every other form of value has to fight for oxygen. But in the deep, the fight begins at a disadvantage because so much value is unseen. No child has a poster of a microbial mat from a hydrothermal vent unless someone has taught them why it matters. No ordinary voter dreams of an abyssal holothurian unless a film gives it music and light. No commodity market prices the continuity of a hadal food web. No spreadsheet automatically includes the worth of not knowing yet. The dark is hard to defend because it cannot easily perform itself for us. That means we have to become better defenders, not by pretending every deep-sea creature is adorable, not by forcing the abyss into surface aesthetics, but by teaching a deeper respect. A respect for systems that do not need to be cute, colorful, or familiar in order to matter. Beauty in the deep often requires education before it becomes visible. A field of nodules may look like scattered rocks until you learn how slowly they formed and what lives around them. A white bacterial mat may look like slime until you learn it is the visible edge of chemical energy becoming life. A transparent animal may seem ghostly until you learn transparency is a masterpiece of survival. A sea cucumber may look almost comical until you realize it is processing the seafloor, participating in a system that links sunlight, death, carbon, and sediment. Understanding is not a replacement for beauty. It is a way beauty becomes reachable. The deep asks for learned wonder, the kind that grows after the first glance. One of the most haunting examples of learned wonder is the whale fall. A whale dies at the surface. For a while, it may float. Gases swell it. Birds may gather. Sharks may feed. Waves move it under the same sunlight that once lit its breath. Then the body sinks. Slowly, massively, it drops through the water column, carrying with it a concentration of organic matter so large that, in the deep, it becomes an event. At the sea floor, a whale fall can transform emptiness into abundance. Scavengers arrive: sharks, hagfish, amphipods, crabs. The soft tissue is consumed. Then organisms colonize the bones. Bacteria break down lipids. Chemical communities develop. For years, sometimes longer, the remains of a single surface-breathing animal become an island of food in the dark. A whale spends its life moving between air and water, between surface breath and deep feeding, between sunlight and shadow. In death, it completes a different migration. It becomes a bridge between worlds. Carbon that once moved through krill, fish, muscle, migration, song, and breath settles into darkness and feeds animals that may never encounter the sunlit ocean except as falling matter. There is grandeur in that. Not the clean grandeur of a monument, but the messy grandeur of ecology. The body does not remain itself. It becomes community. It becomes sequence. It becomes an opportunity for life organized around decay. On land, we often hide death. We sanitize it, ritualize it, place it in special grounds, protect the living from its processes. The deep does not hide death, because death is one of its main deliveries. Marine snow, carcasses, falls, fragments. The dark ocean is fed by endings. But endings down there are not simply endings. They are arrivals. That idea can feel uncomfortable because human grief wants identity to remain intact. We want the beloved to remain the beloved, not matter redistributed. We are not wrong to want that. Love has its own truth. But ecology has another truth, older and less personal. Nothing living remains only itself forever. The deep ocean embodies that truth with extraordinary patience. Every flake of marine snow is a small surrender of form. Every whale fall is a feast of transformation. Every carbon particle sinking into the abyss is a line between sunlight and darkness. The ocean is not a grave in the simple sense. It is a converter of endings into continuities. This is why calling the deep dead is so profoundly mistaken. It lives by receiving the dead. And that makes it one of the planet's great engines of transformation. There is a sound dimension to this transformation as well, and sound may be the deep's most overlooked form of presence. Underwater, the world is not arranged around sight in the way ours is. Sound can travel long distances through water, especially within certain layers where temperature and pressure guide it like a channel. Whales use this acoustic world with an intimacy we are only beginning to appreciate. Their calls can cross enormous distances. The ocean, dark to eyes, can be spacious to ears. Imagine a whale calling through black water. The animal does not need a visible horizon. It sends vibration into a medium that carries the voice outward. The call expands through pressure and cold, shaped by the structure of the water itself. Somewhere far away, another animal may receive it, or not. The call may fade into noise, into ship engines, into geological rumble, into the layered soundscape of an ocean increasingly altered by human machinery. In air, darkness makes us reach for light. In the sea, darkness often makes life reach for sound. That should change how we think about pollution. We are very visual creatures, so we worry most easily about visible damage. Oil slicks, plastic on beaches, dead animals, brown water. Noise seems abstract because it disappears as soon as it is made. But underwater noise can occupy habitat. It can mask communication. It can change behavior. It can make the dark more difficult to live in for animals that depend on listening. A ship passing far above may be an acoustic event below. A survey pulse may travel through a world where animals use sound to find one another, navigate, feed, survive. The dark ocean is not a silent theater for our noise. It is already full of listening. This matters emotionally because it breaks another illusion. We think of the deep as remote from everyday life, yet global trade is loud above it. Every object shipped across oceans carries not only carbon and labor and cost, but a trail of sound through marine habitats. The modern world hums through water. Somewhere in the dark, a creature hears us without knowing what we are. That may be one of the loneliest forms of human presence. To be heard as disturbance by lives that cannot imagine your motives. And yet, sound also offers one of the most beautiful possibilities. Because we cannot see far in the deep, listening becomes a way of knowing without lighting. Hydrophones can record whales, earthquakes, ice, storms, even human activity. They can reveal patterns across distances that cameras cannot cover. They teach us that observation need not always mean illumination. There may be a lesson there. To understand the dark, perhaps we need not always brighten it. Sometimes, we need to listen. The deep rewards quiet instruments. A world adapted to darkness may be better approached by ears, chemistry, patience, and minimal disturbance than by floodlights alone. This does not mean we should never use light. It means light should be one tool among humbler tools, not the symbol of conquest. The more sensitive our instruments become, the more subtle our ethics must become with them. Because power without subtlety is violence, even when it calls itself research. There is another layer of darkness that belongs to the human mind itself. For centuries, the ocean has been a screen for what we fear. We imagined sea monsters at the edges of maps, krakens pulling ships under, serpents coiled in untraveled waters, gods beneath storms. These myths were not merely ignorance, they were emotional technologies. They gave shape to a truth sailors knew physically. The sea is larger than the human body and indifferent to human plans. Modern science removed many monsters, but it did not remove the feeling that produced them. If anything, the feeling became more precise. Now we know there are trenches deeper than Everest is tall. We know sunlight fails. We know pressure climbs beyond intuition. We know huge migrations happen unseen. We know animals make light, and others erase themselves into blackness. We know the seafloor contains places no eye has visited. Science did not make the ocean less mysterious. It made the mystery better informed. This is one of the great gifts of knowledge when it is handled honestly. It does not always flatten wonder, it can deepen it. The old mapmaker wrote monsters because the blank demanded drama. The modern oceanographer writes depth contours, oxygen levels, species ranges, acoustic profiles, carbon fluxes, and uncertainty margins. The drama is still there, but now it has structure. It has pressure values. It has chemistry. It has organisms with names and organisms waiting for names. The real ocean is stranger than the invented one because the real ocean does not need to obey human narrative instincts. A monster has a role. It attacks, guards, symbolizes. A deep-sea ecosystem simply exists in layered complexity that does not arrange itself around us. Reality is often less theatrical than myth, and more unsettling. The ocean's darkness is like that. It does not lunge, it surrounds. Consider the astronaut for a moment. An astronaut looking out from orbit sees black space and a bright Earth. The planet glows with cloud systems, deserts, forests, cities at night, storms curling like white fingerprints. From that height, Earth appears unified, delicate, luminous. Many astronauts speak of the overview effect, the emotional shift that comes from seeing the planet whole. Now imagine the opposite view, Not overview, underview. Instead of seeing Earth from above as a bright sphere, imagine entering its ocean until the brightness vanishes and the planet becomes interior. No borders, no continents, no city lights, no weather visible except as consequences, no human geography, only water, pressure, cold, particles, animals, and blackness. If the overview effect says, "Look how fragile and united the surface is," the underview effect might say, "Look how little of Earth's reality the surface contains." We need both effects. The sky view gives us planetary unity. The deep view gives us planetary humility. One makes Earth seem small in space. The other makes humanity seem small within Earth. The first can inspire protection, because the planet looks fragile from outside. The second can inspire restraint, because the planet feels vast from inside. Together, they correct opposite errors: the error that Earth is all there is, and the error that the part of Earth we inhabit is all of Earth. We are not only beneath the stars, we are above the abyss. That double position is what it means to be human on this planet. Maybe that is why the phrase "darker than space" matters. It reconnects the upward and downward mysteries. It says the unknown is not only beyond the atmosphere, it is also within the Earth's blue skin. It says exploration is not a ladder in one direction, it is also a descent into the nearby. And unlike space, the ocean is part of our metabolism. We breathe air shaped by oceanic processes. We eat from marine food webs. We ship goods across water. We warm the climate, and the ocean absorbs heat. We emit carbon, and the ocean takes some of it in. We discard plastic, and the ocean receives it. We are not separate observers of this darkness. We are participants in the system above it, connected by exchanges too large to feel individually and too important to ignore. Space can humble us by being unreachable. The ocean humbles us by being entangled. Entanglement is difficult for modern life because modern life hides connections. You buy a device and the minerals inside it have histories. You eat fish and the fish has a food web. You turn on lights and energy has a source. You throw away plastic and away becomes a route, not a destination. You live inland, and rain, climate, shipping, and carbon still tie your life to the sea. The deep ocean is where many hidden routes end. Not all of them, but enough. It receives, it stores, it transforms, it records. And because it is dark, those endings often stay out of the moral imagination. A landfill can be photographed. A polluted river can be smelled. A clear-cut forest can be walked through. A disturbed abyssal plain remains abstract to most people because the camera has not become part of everyday conscience. Perhaps the next great environmental shift is not only to protect what we can see, but to develop conscience for what we cannot see. A dark conscience. A conscience capable of including depth. This does not mean every person must become an oceanographer. It means culture has to learn new reflexes. When someone says deep sea mining, we should not picture empty mud. When someone says ocean carbon, we should not picture a blue surface only. When someone says biodiversity, we should not picture only reefs and whales and charismatic animals. When someone says dark, we should not hear worthless. Language is where protection often begins. The deep needs better language in public life. Not exaggerated language, not false certainty, not fear-mongering. Better language. Language that can hold mystery and fact together. Language that says, this place is poorly known, demonstrably alive, climatically important, technologically difficult, and vulnerable to decisions made by people who will never see it. That is a sentence less catchy than a myth, but it may be more useful. And usefulness, in the end, may be part of love. Not the cold usefulness of extraction, but the usefulness of care made practical. A policy that slows harm is love in administrative clothing. A map made to prevent damage is love in data form. A careful survey is love as patience. A treaty can be love if it protects what cannot speak. That may sound too gentle for geopolitics, but perhaps geopolitics could use more forms of disciplined gentleness. The deep ocean certainly could. There is also the matter of time. The surface world is becoming faster. Markets react in milliseconds. Messages cross oceans instantly through cables on the sea floor. News cycles churn. Outrage peaks and decays. Technologies scale before societies understand them. The future feels compressed, as if everything must happen now or be lost. The deep ocean offers a radically different clock. Manganese nodules grow over millions of years. Cold water corals may live for centuries or longer. Sediments accumulate slowly. Deep currents turn over on timescales longer than political careers. Recovery from disturbance may take decades, centuries, or unknown spans. In the abyss, time is not empty. It is structural. When a fast civilization enters a slow world, the danger is not only physical, it is temporal violence. We can destroy in minutes what formed over geological time. We can scrape a habitat in a season that would not recover within the horizon of any lawmaker who approved it. We can alter chemical balances faster than deep systems can adapt. We can introduce noise rhythms utterly unlike the evolutionary soundscape. The deep's slowness is not inefficiency. It is the pace of its being. To demand that it recover on human schedules is another form of misunderstanding. Some places cannot forgive quickly, not because they are angry, because they are slow. This idea should make us cautious in a way ordinary environmental slogans sometimes fail to do. The deep is not resilient in the simplistic sense that nature always bounces back. Nature changes. Nature absorbs. Nature reorganizes. Sometimes it recovers, sometimes it shifts into something else. Sometimes the record of disturbance persists. A track in abyssal sediment may outlive the memory of the person who made the decision that caused it. There is humility in that, or there should be. The deep is where consequences can outlast intentions. If the ocean is darker than space, then it also teaches a different kind of exploration ethic than space sometimes does. Space exploration often carries the language of expansion, colonies, frontiers, resources, settlement. The deep ocean makes such language feel absurd, or at least premature. You cannot colonize the abyss in any ordinary human sense. You can visit in pressure-resistant machines, install instruments, lay cables, perhaps operate equipment. But the abyss does not become home. It remains lethal to the unaided body. It reminds us that access is not belonging. This is important because technological cultures often confuse access with entitlement. We can reach, therefore we may take. We can measure, therefore we understand. We can survive briefly, therefore the place has been mastered. The deep contradicts each step. It says, your machine survived for 6 hours. I have been dark for millions of years. It says, your light revealed 10 meters. I continue for thousands of kilometers. It says, your map has improved. Your ignorance remains vast. This is not a reason to stop exploring. It is a reason to explore differently. The old heroic explorer stands above a landscape, names it, claims it, returns with a story of overcoming. The new deep explorer, if they are wise, returns with a story of limits. Not failure, limits. The limit of sight, the limit of sampling, the limit of safe disturbance, the limit of analogy, the limit of confidence. Limits are not fashionable, but they are among the most important discoveries. Knowing where knowledge ends is the beginning of good judgment. The deep ocean is a constant educator in epistemic humility, though it rarely uses such dry language. It simply destroys weak assumptions. It makes instruments fail. It hides animals outside the beam. It returns ambiguous footage. It complicates neat diagrams. It shows that every descent is local, temporary, partial. The deep's first lesson is not, "Look what we found." It is, "Look how little this finding covers." That lesson is not discouraging. It is liberating, if received correctly. It means there is still room for wonder that is not manufactured. It means discovery is not exhausted. It means young scientists today are not arriving after the great age of exploration, but during one of its strangest chapters. Not the conquest of continents, but the careful interpretation of a living darkness inside the planet's oceans. Some of the most important creatures on Earth may still be unnamed. Some of the most important processes may still be underestimated. Some of the most consequential decisions may still be avoidable. The story is not over. It is dark, which is different. There is a subtle emotional danger in saying the deep is full of secrets. Secrets can make a place feel as if it owes us revelation, but the ocean does not owe revelation. The secrets are ours, in a sense. They are the names we give to the gap between reality and our knowledge of it. To the animals down there, their lives are not secret. They are simply lives. The vent does not hide its chemistry from itself. The amphipod does not experience its existence as undiscovered. The abyss does not become mysterious when no scientist is present. Mystery is a relationship, not a property. The deep is mysterious to us because we are limited. This shift matters ethically. If mystery is a relationship, then exploration should change the relationship, not strip the world bare. It should make us better relatives to the unknown, not merely better consumers of it. It should teach us where to step lightly, where to leave instruments rather than extract samples, where to study long enough before acting, where to admit uncertainty in public decisions. A good relationship with the deep would include awe, restraint, patience, and accountability. Not easy words, not glamorous words. But the deep is not an easy place, and glamour has never been its main truth. Its main truth may be endurance. Dark endurance. Life enduring without day. Processes enduring without witness. A planet enduring beneath its own shining surface. But endurance should not be mistaken for invulnerability. This is a mistake humans make again and again. We see something vast and assume it cannot be harmed. The sky was too large to pollute until it was not. The ocean was too large to alter until it was acidifying, warming, filling with plastic, shifting fish ranges, bleaching reefs, absorbing carbon, and carrying our noise. Vastness can delay visible harm. It cannot cancel it. The deep's size may be one reason damage remains psychologically remote. How could our actions matter down there? But scale works both ways. The ocean is enormous, yes, and our species has become enormous in its collective force. We move more sediment in some contexts than rivers. We alter atmospheric chemistry. We send sound across basins. We produce materials no organism evolved to digest quickly. We are now a geological influence, arguing with a geological environment. That is not a compliment. It is a warning. To become powerful at planetary scale, without becoming careful at planetary scale, is to become a danger to things you may never see. The deep ocean is among those things. There is a moment in many deep-sea videos when nothing much seems to happen. The camera is moving slowly over sediment. Marine snow passes through the beam. A small animal appears, then exits. The frame continues. If you are used to surface documentaries, you may feel impatience. Where is the action? Where is the chase? Where is the music telling you what to feel? But if you stay, your attention begins to slow. You notice the snow. You notice tracks. You notice that the sediment is not perfectly smooth. You notice tiny disturbances, holes, burrows, the trace of life beneath the surface. You notice that the animal's movement is not lazy, but economical. You notice the field is not empty. It is quiet. The deep changes the viewer by demanding a different tempo. This is one reason cinematic storytelling about it must be careful. Too much drama falsifies the place. Too little tension fails to carry the human mind into it. The truth lies in a kind of suspended urgency. Something important is always present, but it may not reveal itself quickly. The stakes are enormous, but the scene may be still. A whole ecological implication may sit inside a single pale flake falling through black water. That is difficult to narrate because modern attention has been trained for impact. The deep teaches impact without speed. It teaches suspense as patience. Imagine watching marine snow for a full minute. At first, it is only particles. Then it becomes a food supply. Then a carbon pathway. Then a vertical memory of the surface. Then a climate process. Then a connection between sunlight and abyssal life. Then a quiet image of death feeding continuity. Nothing in the frame has changed dramatically. You changed. You learned how to see what the frame meant. That is the deep's form of revelation. Not always a monster from the black. Sometimes a fleck of white falling slowly. Sometimes the most important thing in the darkness is small. This is another correction to the space comparison. Space overwhelms with large scales. Stars, galaxies, nebulae, black holes, cosmic background radiation. Distances so vast, numbers become symbols more than experiences. The deep ocean can overwhelm with scale too, but it also overwhelms by making smallness matter. Microbes advance, particles in marine snow, tiny lights, protein adaptations under pressure, chemical gradients, larvae dispersing, sediment grains. The difference between survival and failure may occur at molecular scale under a mountain of water. The abyss is cosmic and microscopic at once. That combination is why it feels so philosophically dense. It refuses the human tendency to choose between grandeur and detail. The deep says, both. A planet-sized system made of tiny processes. A darkness vast enough to compare with space, sustained by particles, enzymes, bacteria, small animals, slow currents, and falling debris. A place where the fate of carbon may hinge partly on organisms too small to see with the naked eye, and where human climate futures may connect to flakes sinking through black water. The sublime, down there, is granular. Awe has texture. It is not only stars. It is sediment. The phrase darker than space also hides a psychological paradox. Most people are less afraid of looking up at space than looking down into deep water, even though space is more hostile by almost every cosmic measure. You can stand under the night sky and feel wonder. You can look at photographs from deep space and feel beauty. But ask someone to imagine floating over dark, open water, unable to see beneath their feet, and the body responds differently. Why? Because space, from Earth, remains distant. It is unreachable in the moment. The dark between stars cannot suddenly touch your ankle. Deep water can. The ocean's darkness is embodied danger. It belongs to a medium you can enter by accident. You can fall into it. You can sink. You can be surrounded. The fear of deep water is not only fear of creatures. It is fear of losing the world of boundaries. On land, the body knows orientation. Feet down, sky up, ground supporting. In deep water, ground disappears. Up may be visible at first, then not. Down is unknown. The body floats only because of fragile conditions. The mind senses volume beneath it and cannot map the scale. The imagination populates the unknown because the unknown is too large to leave blank. This is why a perfectly calm ocean can be terrifying. Calm does not mean safe. Calm may only mean the surface is not revealing the danger. The surface is a poor narrator. It tells you about wind. It tells you very little about depth. This is true emotionally as well as physically. People have surfaces. Societies have surfaces. Histories have surfaces. The deep ocean becomes metaphor almost too easily, but the metaphor is earned because the physical reality is so strong. A calm exterior can cover pressure, darkness, motion, hunger, memory. A bright surface can hide an entire vertical world. The danger is making the metaphor too human, and forgetting the ocean is not primarily a symbol. It is water, life, chemistry, pressure, geology. But symbols arise from material truths, and the material truth here is undeniable. The world is deeper than its face. The ocean proves it, every day. Let us look again at the boundary around 200 meters, where the sunlight zone gives way to twilight. This boundary matters because it is the beginning of a great energy problem. Above it, photosynthesis can support abundant life. Below it, direct sunlight no longer produces food in the same way. Life below must depend on what falls, what migrates, what is transported, or what chemistry produces in special places like vents. That energy problem shapes bodies. In the twilight zone, animals often migrate because the surface is rich but dangerous. In the midnight zone, animals conserve because food is sparse. On the sea floor, animals may wait for falls, graze sediments, filter particles, scavenge, host symbionts, exploit chemical sources. Every strategy is an answer to the same question. How do you live where the sun does not pay the bills? The surface world rarely asks this question because sunlight subsidizes everything so generously. Even fossil fuels are ancient sunlight, stored in biological matter over geological time and burned by us in a few industrial centuries. Agriculture is managed sunlight. Forests are sunlight-made wooden. Most food is sunlight-made edible through layers of life. We are, in the broad sense, solar animals. The deep complicates that identity. It shows us life that is indirectly solar, life that is chemically powered, life that stretches the definition of dependence. It reveals that biology is not a single economy. It is a portfolio of strategies across gradients of light, pressure, temperature, and chemistry. Life is more inventive than daylight. That should be exhilarating. It should also make us careful with the edges of possibility. Extreme environments are not empty margins. They are laboratories of adaptation. A hadal snailfish is not merely a curiosity. It is a living answer to pressure. A vent microbe is not merely slime. It is a living answer to chemical energy. A transparent animal is a living answer to predation in dim water. A bioluminescent flash is a living answer to communication without sun. Each organism is a solved problem. To erase one before understanding it is to lose not just a species, but a solution. And perhaps a question we had not yet learned to ask. When scientists study deep-sea life, they often face a frustrating paradox. Bringing an organism to the surface may destroy the conditions that make it itself. Pressure changes, temperature changes, light changes. The body that functioned perfectly in the deep may deform, rupture, fade, or behave unnaturally when removed. Even observation can be a form of translation loss. The animal arrives in the human world as evidence and distortion at the same time. This is why in situ observation matters so much. Seeing life where it lives, under the pressures and temperatures and darkness that shaped it. But in situ observation is hard. It requires expensive vehicles, careful planning, harsh conditions, limited time. The deep makes proper context difficult, and without context, we misunderstand. There is a humility lesson here too. Some truths cannot be lifted intact into our world. They must be met in theirs. This applies beyond biology. A sediment core removed from the abyss carries history, but not the full living landscape. A map carries shape, but not the feel of water movement or the behavior of animals at night. A sample bottle carries chemistry, but not the whole process that created it. Every act of study extracts some aspect while leaving others behind. Science knows this. Good science states limits. Culture often forgets them. The deep is teaching us the difference between having a sample and having understanding. A piece of darkness brought into light is not the whole dark. That is why footage can feel so powerful. It preserves at least the visual context of place, even if altered by lights. The animal remains in water. The snow falls around it. The sediment lies as it lay. The darkness outside the beam remains visible as darkness, not converted into lab space. A good deep-sea image does not eliminate distance. It lets distance remain part of the encounter. The best images from the deep do not make the deep familiar. They make unfamiliarity precise. Precision matters because the word deep is too blunt. A coral reef at 30 meters is deep to a casual swimmer. A submarine shelf at 200 meters is deep to sunlight. 1,000 meters is deep to human engineering. 4,000 meters is abyssal. 6,000 and beyond is hadal. Each threshold changes conditions, communities, and possibilities. But everyday language compresses all of this into a single sensation. Down there. The compression is understandable. It is also dangerous. When all darkness becomes one darkness, all deep places become interchangeable. But they are not. A twilight ecosystem is not a vent field. A seamount is not an abyssal plain. A trench is not a continental slope. Different depths have different vulnerabilities, recovery times, species, currents, and roles. Care requires specificity. You cannot protect the deep as a vague emotional object. You protect places, processes, species, migrations, corridors, vents, plains, slopes, seamounts, trench systems, soundscapes, and the conditions that allow them to continue. You protect the relationships between falling particles and feeding animals, between currents and larvae, between darkness and behavior, between quiet and communication. The ocean's darkness is unified emotionally, but diverse ecologically. That diversity is part of the wonder. It is also part of the challenge. The more diverse a hidden system is, the easier it is to damage something no one noticed was distinct. Imagine a city at night, but seen only from above through cloud. You know there are lights somewhere. You know people live there, but you cannot see neighborhoods, hospitals, schools, kitchens, alleys, graves, gardens. Now imagine making decisions about demolishing districts based only on that cloudy view. That is roughly how crude our relationship with much of the deep still is. We know enough to know it matters. We do not know enough to act casually. Knowing enough to know you do not know enough is not paralysis. It is wisdom beginning. There is one more human story inside this darkness. The story of the people who choose to study it. They are not all famous explorers. Many never descend in person. They process data, maintain instruments, identify larvae, calibrate sensors, model currents, archive footage, compare genetic sequences, repair cables, write grant proposals, argue over methods, and spend long nights at sea waiting for machines to return from black water. Exploration often looks glamorous only after editing. In real time, it is repetition, uncertainty, weather delays, equipment problems, seasickness, fatigue, and the constant possibility that the ocean will take the instrument and return nothing. There is emotional courage in that kind of work. Not the simple courage of a single dramatic risk, though that exists too. A quieter courage, dedicating years to a world most people will never think about, asking questions whose answers may be partial, technical, and slow, caring about animals that may never become famous, building knowledge that may only later become essential. The deep ocean is not explored by heroism alone. It is explored by maintenance, by patience, by teams, by people labeling samples at midnight while the ship rolls and the data looks inconclusive. That is a beautiful kind of devotion. The ocean does not reward it easily. It gives fragments, a new observation, a better map, a surprising species range, a chemical anomaly, a lost vehicle, a failed dive, a recovered sensor, a mystery sharpened rather than solved. But fragments accumulate. That is how the darkness becomes less absolute without becoming conquered. The goal is not to turn the entire deep into a lit room. The goal is to become worthy of the darkness we enter. Worthiness here might mean several things. It might mean admitting uncertainty in environmental decisions. It might mean funding long-term observation instead of only short-term extraction assessments. It might mean protecting representative areas before disturbance. It might mean designing quieter ships, less invasive instruments, better international governance. It might mean treating traditional ocean knowledge and coastal communities as part of the conversation, even when the habitat in question lies far offshore. Because the ocean is connected to cultures as well as ecosystems. It might mean refusing the old story that every frontier must become a market. It might mean recognizing that restraint is not anti-human. Sometimes restraint is what allows humans to remain human in the presence of power. The deep ocean will never be a place most people visit. Its protection, therefore, depends on imagination joined to trust. Public imagination must care about what cannot be personally seen. Public trust must support scientists, communities, and institutions capable of studying and governing it responsibly. Neither imagination nor trust is easy now. Both are fragile. Both are contested. But the deep gives us a reason to rebuild them. Because no individual can verify the abyss alone. We depend on collective knowledge. We depend on instruments built by many hands, data reviewed by many minds, maps shared across institutions, regulations negotiated across nations. The deep is too large for private certainty. It forces us into a communal relationship with truth. That may be another reason it matters in this century. The ocean's darkness cannot be understood by opinion alone. It requires measurement, humility, peer correction, repeated observation, and patience with ambiguity. It requires the very habits that public life often erodes. To care for the deep is, in some sense, to practice caring for reality beyond immediate personal experience. That practice may be one of the most important forms of maturity left to us. The deep is a test of whether the unseen can still be real in a culture addicted to visibility. Now, listen to the phrase one more time. The ocean gets darker than space. At the beginning, it sounded like a comparison between two places, ocean and space, down and up, water and vacuum. But by now the comparison has opened into something else. Space darkness tells us about distance, expansion, ancient light, and the limits of the observable universe. Ocean darkness tells us about absorption, concealment, life without sunlight, pressure, climate, and the limits of human attention. Both darknesses humble us, but they humble us differently. Space says, "You are brief in a cosmos of unimaginable age." The ocean says, "You are partial on a planet you thought was familiar." Space says, "Your world is one among countless worlds." The ocean says, "Even your one world contains worlds you have barely met." The first humility expands outward. The second humility deepens inward. We need both. Without the first, we become cosmically arrogant. Without the second, we become locally arrogant. We may know the names of galaxies and still misunderstand the water under our ships. We may dream of life on Europa while damaging the vent systems that taught us such life might be possible. We may speak of becoming multiplanetary while failing to become fully aware of this planet. That is not an argument against space. It is an argument against using space as an escape from earthly ignorance. The stars do not absolve us of the ocean. If anything, they make the ocean more precious. So far, this is the only planet where we know the universe has produced oceans full of life. The only one where darkness underwater glows with animals. The only one where a surface species can ask whether the deep is darker than space and build instruments to find out. That uniqueness should not make us possessive in the old sense. It should make us careful. Careful with the blue world. Careful with the black one inside it. Let us imagine, then, a future expedition many years from now. Not a grand fantasy, a plausible one. A quiet vessel, operating with quieter engines. Autonomous vehicles moving through the water with low-impact lights, sensitive cameras, chemical sensors, environmental DNA samplers, passive acoustic arrays. Instruments designed not to dominate the darkness, but to listen into it. Scientists watching not for a single spectacular creature, but for patterns across years. They return to the same abyssal site again and again, not to take everything, to notice change. They learn the seasonal pulse of marine snow. They record animal tracks. They monitor sound. They study how warming surface waters alter the food falling into the deep. They compare disturbed and undisturbed areas. They discover species not through conquest, but through long acquaintance. They build a relationship with a place no human body can inhabit. That future is less dramatic than a flag on a trench floor. It is also more mature. The next age of exploration, if it is wise, will not be defined only by firsts. First descent, deepest dive, newest record, most extreme image. Records are thrilling, but they can become surface drama imposed on a deep reality. The more important work may be returns, repeated visits, long-term observatories, slow baselines, patterns visible only after patience. The deep does not need us to be heroic for a day. It needs us to be responsible for a century. That is harder and less cinematic, but perhaps more beautiful. Because the real cliffhanger is not what monster waits below. The real cliffhanger is what kind of species we become when we finally understand that below is not empty. Do we rush to extract? Do we hesitate forever and learn nothing? Do we study carefully but fail to protect? Do we build institutions capable of matching the scale of the system? Do we let the dark remain merely a backdrop for content, or do we let it change our behavior? The ocean is not the only mystery here. We are. The deep asks a question about us that no sonar can answer, and maybe that is why the ending must be quiet. Because the ocean's darkness is not a problem solved by a final sentence. It is a condition to be lived beside, a presence under the surface, a reminder that the planet is not exhausted by human categories, a vastness close enough to matter and distant enough to humble. The waves will still come in. Children will still run from foam. Ships will still cross. Storms will still rise. The moon will pull tides across continental shelves. Phytoplankton will bloom in sunlit water, and some of what they become will sink. Animals will migrate upward in darkness and descend before dawn. Vents will smoke. Whale calls will travel. Snow will fall. Pressure will press. Trenches will wait. And somewhere, a flash of blue-green light will appear in black water for reasons that have nothing to do with us. That flash may be a lure, a warning, a mating signal, a confusion tactic, a message in a language no human will ever fully speak. But it is also, for us, if we are lucky enough to imagine it, a reminder that light does not belong only to the sun. In the deepest darkness on Earth, life makes its own brief stars. Not stars like those above, burning across cosmic distances, but small, cold stars carried in bodies, made for survival, visible for a second, and gone. The ocean gets darker than space, and then, in that darkness, something living shines. Not for us. That is what makes it beautiful. Not for us. And still, somehow, it changes us. There is one last descent hidden inside all of this, and it is not a descent through water. It is a descent through certainty. At the surface, certainty comes easily. The horizon looks clean. The wave has a shape. The weather can be described. The sea has a color. A person can say the ocean is blue and feel, for ordinary purposes, correct. Then the first certainty fails. The ocean is not blue all the way down. Then the next. The ocean is not lit all the way down. Then the next. The darkness is not empty. Then the next. The empty-looking seafloor is not lifeless. Then the next. The places we cannot reach are still affected by us. By the time you follow these failures far enough, certainty has changed its nature. It has become smaller, more careful, more honest. You do not say, "I know the ocean." You say, "I know a little of what the ocean has allowed us to measure." You do not say, "The deep is barren." You say, "The deep is difficult to observe." You do not say, "Darkness means nothing is there." You say, "Darkness means I cannot see what is there yet." That yet is important. It keeps humility from becoming defeat. The unknown is not a wall only. Sometimes it is an invitation. But the invitation is not to conquer the darkness. It is to become the kind of observer who can enter without immediately simplifying, the kind of observer who can return with questions sharper than answers, the kind who understands that wonder and uncertainty are not opposites. This is difficult because the modern world rewards confidence, even when confidence is just ignorance speaking loudly. The deep ocean punishes false confidence. A wrong seal fails. A weak cable snaps. A bad assumption about pressure destroys equipment. A careless light changes behavior. An incomplete environmental assessment misses consequences. The ocean does not care how certain we sounded in the meeting. It answers in physics. Physics is one of the last honest languages. Water pressure cannot be negotiated with. Light attenuation cannot be persuaded. Chemistry cannot be flattered. A current will not respect a deadline. The deep is immune to rhetoric, which is one reason it is so valuable as a teacher. It returns us to conditions, to limits, to reality. And reality, even when dark, can be a mercy. Because a civilization that forgets reality becomes dangerous to everything around it, including itself. The ocean keeps reality under pressure, literally, and perhaps symbolically too. Think of all the human stories that have unfolded above dark water. Explorers crossing unknown seas with no idea of the landscapes beneath them. Enslaved people carried across the Atlantic over abyssal depths, their suffering recorded in human history above a non-human darkness that received bodies, chains, ballast, grief. Warships passing over trenches, migrants crossing at night, the black water beneath them not an idea, but immediate danger. Fishermen working before dawn, scientists lowering instruments, tourists photographing sunsets, oil platforms drilling, cables being laid, storms taking ships, ashes scattered, messages sent across fiber optic lines lying on the seafloor. The ocean's darkness is not separate from human history. It is underneath it. That underneath is not passive. It shapes roots, economies, risks, myths, empires. The deep ocean has influenced where cables go, where submarines hide, where resources are imagined, where storms gather strength, where fish migrate, where nations draw claims. It is absent from many ordinary histories because it is not easily visualized. But absence from the story is not absence from the world. A map of human history without the deep ocean is like a portrait with the lungs missing. The surface events depend on hidden volume. We breathe because the planet breathes, in systems too large to fit in a classroom diagram. And when the diagram simplifies, something important is lost. This is why the deep should not be left only to specialists, even though specialists are essential. The public does not need to master every chemical cycle or taxonomic distinction, but it does need an emotional and conceptual relationship with the deep that is better than blankness. Blankness is what allows careless decisions. Blankness is what turns living places into areas. Blankness is what makes darkness available for projection. The first act of care may simply be to replace blankness with presence. To say, there is something there, not something vague, a world. The ocean's darkness also asks us to reconsider what exploration is for. For a long time, exploration was tangled with extraction, empire, prestige, and competition. Reach the pole, cross the ocean, climb the mountain, plant the flag, be first, bring back wealth, maps, specimens, stories. These impulses built knowledge, yes, but they also built harm. The deep ocean offers a chance, maybe one of the last great chances, to practice another model. Explore not to possess. Explore to understand what must not be carelessly broken. Explore to widen the circle of moral attention. Explore to learn how to live with unknowns. Explore to become less dangerous. That may sound idealistic, but it is also pragmatic. A poorly understood ocean is a risk to fisheries, climate predictions, disaster preparedness, biodiversity, medicine, international law, and the stability of systems humans rely on. Knowledge of the deep is not a luxury for people who like strange animals. It is part of knowing the planet that keeps us alive. The deep is not beyond practical concern. It is practical concern extended beyond the visible. And yet, practicality alone cannot carry the whole weight. We also need awe. Not because awe replaces policy, but because policy without awe becomes brittle. Awe keeps the living world from becoming only a management problem. Awe reminds us that the goal is not merely to maintain services for humans, but to recognize participation in something larger than usefulness. The deep is useful, but it is not only useful. That distinction is sacred, even if you do not use sacred language. When a place is only useful, it is always waiting to be used up. When a place is more than useful, restraint becomes imaginable. The ocean deserves to be more than useful in the human mind. There is a small scene I keep returning to. A person standing at night beside the sea. No ship, no instrument, no expedition, just a coastline, dark water, and the hush of waves arriving from distances the person cannot see. Above, stars. Below, deeper darkness. For once, the upward and downward mysteries are present together. The sky black because the universe is vast and the atmosphere is thin. The water black because the ocean is dense and the light has failed. The person looks up, then down. Up, ancient light. Down, living darkness. Up, distance. Down, depth. Up, the question of where everything is. Down, the question of what this one planet still contains. That person is all of us, whether we stand at the shore or not. We live between the two darks. One calls us outward, one calls us inward. One expands the imagination beyond Earth, one deepens the imagination into Earth. One tells us we are not the center of the universe. The other tells us we are not even the center of our own planet's story. Together, they do something necessary. They make arrogance feel ridiculous. And perhaps, if we let them, they make care feel natural. Because smallness can lead to despair, but it can also lead to tenderness. If we are small, then our small acts matter in a different way, not because they command the whole, but because they are how a small creature participates. A careful law, a protected area, a quieter technology, a funded survey, a changed material, a better story. A child taught that the deep is alive. A decision delayed until knowledge improves. These are not grand against the scale of the ocean, but they are not nothing. The deep is made of small processes too. Snowflakes of the dead, flashes of living light, grains of sediment, molecules bracing proteins against pressure, signals crossing black water. Small things belong in vastness. That may be the gentlest lesson the dark ocean gives us. So when we say the ocean gets darker than space, we are not trying to win a contest between wonders. Space does not become less astonishing. The stars do not dim. The galaxies do not shrink. The cosmic dark remains one of the great facts of existence. But the ocean's darkness adds a second astonishment, one we have neglected because it is close. It says that Earth still has an interior mystery large enough to change philosophy, science, politics, and the human sense of home. It says the blue planet is not truly blue all the way down. It says our maps are still young. It says life is less dependent on our favorite conditions than we thought. It says vision is not the measure of value. It says darkness can be habitat, archive, warning, and teacher. And it says that the most unfamiliar place many of us will ever contemplate is part of the same planet as our kitchens, streets, hospitals, fields, and bedrooms. This is the intimacy that makes the ocean so powerful. The abyss is not elsewhere. It is here, hidden, vertically. A star is far away in a way that lets the mind keep it separate. The deep sea is near in a way that makes separation feel like denial. The same rain that darkens a city street may run eventually to the sea. The same carbon in a breath participates in cycles that touch the ocean. The same plastic discarded carelessly may break, travel, sink. The same technologies that connect people across continents rest on cables through black water. The deep is not background. It is infrastructure, metabolism, habitat, and mystery all at once. No wonder it overwhelms language. The word ocean is too small. But it is the word we have, so we must make it deeper when we speak it. Ocean. Not only waves, not only blue, not only surface. Darkness, too. Life, too. Pressure, too. Memory, too. And now, after all of this, the final descent is quieter, because it no longer needs to prove the darkness matters. It has already mattered. It mattered in the vanished red light. It mattered in the twilight migration. It mattered in the first bioluminescent flash. It mattered in the marine snow, the vent, the whale fall, the nodule, the trench, the unmapped plain, the hydrophone recording, the scientist leaning toward the screen. It mattered in the fact that our own star cannot illuminate most of our own ocean. That is enough to change the shape of wonder. The sea is not a surface beneath the sky. It is a dark universe under a blue door. And the door is open only a little. One more thing becomes visible only after sitting with the darkness for a long time. The ocean is not dark in spite of being part of Earth. It is part of Earth because it is dark. That sounds strange until you remember that planets are not made for human senses. They are not obligated to be scenic. Earth did not become alive only in the places that look beautiful to us from a distance. It became alive through chemistry, gradients, membranes, pressures, minerals, heat, water, time. Much of that story happened before there was anything like a human eye to approve of it. Much of it still happens where eyes are useless. We live in a late, bright chapter and keep mistaking brightness for the book. But the book is older than light in the eye. The book is written in dissolved minerals, drifting carbon, pressure-shaped proteins, the slow rain of organic matter, the quiet labor of microbes, the migrations of animals whose names most people will never learn. It is written in darkness as much as in sunlight, perhaps more. This recognition does not make the surface less precious. If anything, it makes the surface miraculous. A thin layer where light still arrives, a brief illuminated balcony over a vast interior night, a place where colors remain, where faces can see faces, where plants make food from a star, and children can watch waves sparkle without knowing how quickly that sparkle ends below them. The surface is beautiful because it is thin, because it is not guaranteed, because beneath it, the planet becomes something else. The mistake is not loving the surface. The mistake is thinking love should stop there. To love the ocean only for its brightness is like loving a person only for their smile. The smile may be real, it may be beautiful, but it is not the whole life. There is depth beneath it. Memory, pain, hunger, resilience, silence, history. The parts not immediately offered to view. A mature love does not demand that everything remain visible and pleasing. It learns to honor what is hidden. The ocean asks for that kind of love. A love that can include black water. A love that can include animals with no familiar face. A love that can include mud, bacteria, pressure, cold, and time. A love that does not need the deep to become bright before it becomes worthy. That may be the emotional work of this story, not to make the deep less frightening, to make it worthy while still frightening. Because some things should frighten us. The pressure should frighten us. The scale should frighten us. Our ignorance should frighten us. Our capacity to damage should frighten us. Fear becomes harmful only when it turns into avoidance or domination. Held correctly, fear sharpens respect. The deep deserves sharpened respect. Imagine now that every map of Earth had another map beneath it. The first map shows continents, borders, roads, cities, mountains, rivers. The second map shows depth, shelves dropping into slopes, slopes into plains, plains into trenches, ridges lifting from abyssal dark, seamounts rising like drowned islands, fracture zones running like scars through the sea floor. The third map shows light, a thin, bright skin, a dim middle, a vast black body. The fourth shows life, migrations rising and falling, whale routes, vent communities, coral gardens, microbial provinces, unknown regions marked not empty, but unobserved. The fifth shows human influence, cables, noise, fishing pressure, shipping lanes, plastic pathways, warming, acidification, exploration leases, protected areas, proposed mining zones. Only when all these maps overlap does the ocean begin to appear as it is. Not blue, layered. The surface map alone is a childhood drawing, necessary but incomplete. The deeper maps are harder to make and harder to feel. But without them, our imagination remains shallow, and a shallow imagination is dangerous on a deep planet. We need a deeper imagination, not darker in the sense of hopeless, darker in the sense of able to enter shadow without declaring it empty. Darker in the sense of patient enough to wait for faint signals. Darker in the sense of humble before what exceeds the beam. A deep imagination is one that can care vertically. That phrase may sound unusual, but it may be exactly what the ocean requires. We are used to caring across distance, for forests far away, for cities across borders, for animals in other climates, for people we may never meet. But the ocean asks us to care downward, to care through layers, to care for what lies below familiar perception, to care for processes that do not present themselves to the eye. Vertical care, care that includes depth. Without it, we will keep living on the surface of our own understanding, and the ocean will keep darkening beneath us, not because the darkness grows, but because our attention fails to descend. Let it descend, just once, all the way past the blue, all the way past the last sunlight, all the way into the black that is not empty. And then bring back not certainty, not conquest, not a slogan, but a different posture toward the world. Lower, quieter, more careful. There is a reason the final image cannot be a triumphant return to the surface. A return would be too easy. It would let us breathe, shake off the dark, step back into sunlight, and tell ourselves the abyss was only a place we visited in thought. But the point of the descent is that the abyss remains after the thought ends. It remains while the viewer closes the video, while the room brightens, while ordinary sounds return. The dark does not depend on attention. It continues under the surface with the same ancient indifference and the same living complexity. That continuity is the haunting part, not a jump scare, not a disaster. Continuity. The deep is there when we remember it and when we do not. The creatures do not wait for narration. The snow does not stop falling between expeditions. The vents do not cool because funding cycles end. The pressure does not lessen because the human mind needs relief. The ocean's hidden majority goes on, and the surface resumes its glittering performance above it. This is why the ending should feel suspended rather than solved, because nothing has been solved. A relationship has been opened. A surface has become a doorway. A darkness has become inhabited. A familiar word has become too small. Ocean. After a journey like this, the word should feel heavier in the mouth. It should carry blue and black together. It should carry sunlight and a photic cold. It should carry beaches and trenches, whales and microbes, ships and snow, children swimming and instruments descending, astronauts looking down at a bright marble, and scientists looking up from data into a world that still refuses easy summary. The word should no longer lie flat. It should fall. That falling is the final movement of the imagination, not falling as disaster, falling as recognition, down through assumptions, down through brightness, down through the old belief that what is unseen is secondary, down through the comforting idea that Earth is already known, down into a humility dark enough to be useful. Useful humility is rare. It does not simply make us feel small. It makes us act differently because we are small. It asks us to handle the world with less arrogance, to treat hidden systems with more patience, to remember that the beam of our knowledge is narrow and that beyond it, life continues. If the ocean teaches only fear, we have misunderstood it. If it teaches only wonder, we have not gone deep enough. It must teach both, and then something beyond both. Responsibility. Responsibility in the dark. That may be the quietest and most difficult light we bring with us. And perhaps that responsibility begins with a simple refusal. Refuse to let darkness mean emptiness. It sounds small, almost too small for a planet-sized subject, but many great harms begin with that confusion. A dark forest was once called wilderness, as if no one lived in relation to it. A wetland was called waste because its value was not understood. A deep plain may now be called resource because the lives around it are too quiet for the market to hear. Again and again, the unseen has been asked to prove itself after the decision to use it has already been made. The ocean asks us to reverse the burden, not prove that the deep is valuable before we spare it. Assume that a living world we barely understand deserves caution until knowledge becomes worthy of action. This is not anti-progress. It is what progress looks like after humility. A young civilization mistakes progress for reach. A wiser one understands that progress also means knowing when not to reach, or how to reach gently, or how to wait. In the deep ocean, restraint may be more advanced than extraction. Patience may be more sophisticated than speed. Listening may be a greater achievement than flooding the dark with light. The future will reveal what kind of progress we choose. The ocean will not argue. It will simply keep the record. And the record is still being written. And now, as the story begins to quiet, imagine descending one final time. No instrument this time, no mission, only attention. It moves down through the sunlit water, past silver fish and wavering surface light. Red disappears, then orange, then yellow. The blue deepens. The familiar world thins overhead. It enters the twilight zone, where silhouettes matter and animals rise at night in numbers too vast for any crowd we have ever seen. It passes the last workable daylight and enters the midnight, where living lamps blink in cold water and every flash means need. It moves through marine snow, through the slow fall of the surface into the dark, through carbon and memory and the remains of blooms that once floated green under the sun. It passes the abyssal plains, the soft sediments, the tracks, the fields of nodules formed by patience beyond empire. It comes near a vent, where black water smokes from the seafloor, and life gathers around chemistry in a darkness that once taught us sunlight was not the only path. It descends into a trench, where the planet bends, and the water stacks into pressure beyond the body's language. The light above is gone. The surface is no longer a place, it is an idea. Down here, the ocean does not look like the ocean. It looks like the inside of night. But night on land is thin. This night has miles in it. This night has animals. This night has snow. This night has mountains, plains, chimneys, scars, hunger, and time. This night has been here through every sunrise that ever warmed a human face, and there is comfort in that, if you let the comfort be strange. The deep is not waiting to be understood before it continues. It does not require our attention to be real. It is real already. Somewhere far above, waves keep catching the light. Somewhere below, the light never arrives. Between them, the planet holds its breath in layers. And in the lowest dark, where no dawn has ever opened, life goes on in forms we are only beginning to meet, moving slowly through a world without sky, without day, without any need to become visible. Maybe that is the final revelation. The ocean is not darker than space because it is empty. It is darker than space because it is full. Full of water thick enough to stop the sun. Full of life adapted to the stopping. Full of histories that sank out of sight. Full of futures we have not chosen carefully enough. Full of darkness that is not nothing, but a world. And when you stand again at the edge of the sea, when the surface shines and the horizon looks calm and the waves come in with their old familiar rhythm, remember that the brightness is only the beginning. Remember that below the glitter, the colors are being taken apart. Remember that below the blue, the largest night on earth begins. Remember that it is not far, only down. And somewhere below, deeper than daylight, deeper than weather, deeper than the reach of ordinary fear, the ocean continues in silence. Not empty, not waiting, just dark and alive.